This is the Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto was neglected by his family because of Kyuubi's soul. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Despite his desire to depart right away, Naruto discovered that a brief wait was required. As much as he hates to admit it, his parents, the Namikaze and Uzumaki, had some priceless artifacts. He needed supplies like food, clothing, seals, ink, kunai, scrolls, his painting set, and heirlooms. Yes, he would take the older items rather than the more significant ones that they would notice right away. The ones with an Uzumaki mark. At one point, when she did notice him, Kushina had told him that his great-grandfather had a magnificent sword. The sword is not sentient, not one with a unique talent. No, his great-grandfather had used this sword through thick and thin. The sword was allegedly one of the first to be forged by a blacksmith from the land of iron and the son of Uzumaki. For some reason, the material was more difficult to define than most, so the man took twice as long to finish it. It aided him in defeating opponents who were far more powerful than he was. It was said that, for reasons that are still unknown, his chakra and he both grew exponentially stronger with each battle. Given his advanced age, which only an Uzumaki could possess, he had resisted the destruction of Uzushiogakure and, upon realizing the inevitable outcome, he handed it to Kushina as she departed. She refused to touch it, stating that she didn't yet believe such a memento was strong enough to handle. Additionally, he would use it to retrieve jutsu scrolls that Kushina typically left behind. In order to compare how she used the scrolls and what she could gain by using them differently, she would take the time in between missions to read them again. The parchment was covered in her scribbles and notes. Regretfully, Minato lacked a Rasengan scroll. It was said to be best practiced and demonstrated to the person who would be taught it, along with the methods to do so. Tsunami had been shown the Rasengan by Minato, but she was told to wait a few weeks because her control was currently quite weak. Ironically, she would have done so in record time if they had paid attention to him. And there was a problem with his genjutsu. His genjutsu was strange in a new way, but his control was a little off, so he would need to spend nearly 2 hours at the pond in the back of the garden to regain his walking abilities. It wasn't that he couldn't cast them, on the contrary. The issue was that he was no longer able to effectively manage them. If a Mekura did vanish, he was no longer able to determine whether it lasted 2 weeks or 5 minutes. It seemed as though all of the specifications he had previously worked with, such as how much chakra is required to last and how to dose it, had abruptly changed. He had all the correct ingredients, but the concentrations were all off, which led to a mess of cooking, to use a straightforward analogy. Hello. Kyuubi. How on earth did I end up, human? What could you possibly mean? He sneered as he asked. My control, my chakra, my genjutsu, it's altered. Oh, that? He spoke as though recalling a trivial detail. It's a component of the process I used on you in that lab under the ground. Really, it's not much. What did you do? First of all, it should be easy for you, human, and they're all linked to me. I was siphoning your chakra, as I previously informed you. Your own reserves have returned to normal now that I have mine. In fact, now that I'm not using them, you may have 1.5 or nearly twice as much as you did a week ago because I kept straining them. You have more chakra for more jutsu and more abilities, so you should be happy, human. In addition, there were a few adjustments that you might find helpful. Kyuubi, in rage, his face matched his hair. As if you frightened me, human. Recall our agreement. Now examine your arms, paying particular attention to your biceps. Kyuubi would receive a reprimand later on for Naruto's failure to conclude the conversation in that manner. After examining his arms, he removed his shirt. It would be an understatement to say he was shocked. It was even more shocking to say he was shocked. He was just stunned. He could see it in his arms and asked, what the heck? He was able to show it off. The only explanation was that it was his. The muscle mass in his biceps had increased from the proximal biceps tendon in his shoulders to the distal biceps tendon. It was like eating knives at his fingers and holding the handle of a machete in contrast to his forearms. They didn't look like they belonged on his child's body. What the devil? He could imagine the Kyuubi grinning with amusement. What is this? That is my chakra. What? The Kyuubi let out a sigh. Naruto nearly yelled, hey, pitiful human, and you call yourself intelligent. Before recalling his location, I could only keep my chakra in your biceps for convenient access until you could master Fuinjutsu and change the seal. When you were hurt, there was no chakra flowing through it, and since the seal prevents me from storing it inside of me, I had to put it there so I could use it or take care of myself without worrying. Fortunately for you, You had no trouble placing it there because your sister had already infused you with a lot of chakra. It will only react to me and my desires, so that's not to say you can use it whenever you want. Except for a fact, you don't need to learn the commands I gave you. They're entirely mine. By this point, Naruto had clearly calmed down. What is it? Nothing that could harm you or put me in danger. I gave you instructions that when you use your genjutsu, even if it's just a tiny speck or something insignificant to me, it will go to your chakra coils and intensify the illusions. At the end, he yawned, add that to the fact that you are no longer just an Uzumaki Namikaze and you're set. Oh, when you say that, wait, are you saying I am no longer a Uzumaki Namikaze? Yes, I did alter your genetic composition. It was Kurama clan DNA that you rubbed on yourself. Consider it this way. In addition to using your father's semen, your mother also became pregnant with a Kurama clan member. Or that you currently carry some Kurama blood. Don't say things like that, Kyuubi. Baka, I'm still a kid. The Kyuubi sighed. Anyway, it said, and fell back asleep. This would not work, but it had positive unintended consequences. He used one on a group of Hyugas, giving them the impression that they were seeing every shade of pink, and it took them 4 attempts to break it, demonstrating that the genjutsu were much more powerful than before. Now that he had more chakra, it was less expensive, but he had it back thanks to his morning training in quick control. If I focus on Mekura and other subtle ones, leaving them with a shadow clone, I should get them under control by evening, and be out of here by sunrise. I can test the others later, there's always a bandit somewhere. Naruto thought to himself. So he did. For some reason, he was unaware that the shinobi were wildly disorganized and in a commotion, but now he had it all. He intended to make one final trip to the library to copy some of the original Konoha Genjutsu, but he ended up in the forbidden section because of the chaos. The one that was only accessible to Jonin, Anbu, elite Chunin with the necessary skills, and everyone else with a certain level of clearance. It turned out that he had discovered some high-level jutsu created by the Nidaime Hokage. Would he be able to take them? He reasoned that it was solely their fault for not adequately guarding this location. He took them all with a sealing scroll and returned home, though he wouldn't be able to call it that tomorrow. With a few Mekura here and there, he had no trouble going back to his room. Since his family was sleeping in under Mekura, which should last until tomorrow afternoon, he had everything he needed, so there was no issue there. Despite the fact that Konoha's gates would be closed, Naruto had discovered that a shipment of goods was scheduled to depart in an hour, giving him a window of opportunity to make his getaway. Surprisingly, the only thing that kept him here was the question of whether or not he should leave a message. He didn't want to write a letter outlining his anger because that would only diminish the significance and meaning of his decision to leave and make it appear like the careless behavior of an irate child. But he didn't want to be kidnapped and leave nothing behind because that would not only make him appear weak, but it would also put anyone he met at risk of being accused of kidnapping. Besides, if he didn't leave a message, no one would even think he left on his own volition. He needed a means of communication. It had to be concise, clear, fashionable, and most importantly, obvious. If no one saw the best message, it was worthless. A thought flashed into his head. It's where he found out about his parents, who are no longer with him. He gained first-hand knowledge of how the world actually operated for those who received focus and attention there. A couple of seals would suffice. Despite the fact that he may not have pulled many practical jokes, Naruto was born with the skills of a prankster. Naruto had found it easier to leave than he had first thought. A little sneaking, crawling under the cart to get through the barely opened gates, and then carefully slipping away, followed by a quick Mekura to the guards who were arguing with a merchant about something, most likely taxes. Naturally, he couldn't have known that the reason it was so simple was because some of his test subjects for relearning his genjutsu happened to be the squad in charge of guarding the barrier that night. After some time, Naruto stopped. It was strange. He felt different now, so far from Konoha that it was no longer visible through the trees. There was some remorse, but not much. The real difference was that Naruto felt free for the first time in his life. Naruto's heart soared here, away from the society he had known and hated for the majority of his life, away from their appearance, their expectations, their sympathy, and those who looked down on him without realizing who he was and what he was capable of. Sweet freedom, sweet freedom. He could see why people would fight and risk their lives for this emotion. But this was no time to lose yourself in contemplation. Mekura would wear off tomorrow, and under the right circumstances, his parents should get his message in 3 days. After that, they should dispatch troops. It was, in a sense, his parents' final test. Tomorrow afternoon, Mekura would wear off, and the following day, it would rain in the evening. It wouldn't be possible to locate him if they hadn't dispatched anyone by then. Additionally, he would arrive at his destination in 4 days at civilian pace. In case some shinobi used his route to return to Konoha, he had the upgraded henge up so that no one who wasn't searching for him would accidentally find him. Where was he heading? He would be avoiding this area for the foreseeable future because Suna was an allied nation. Perhaps when things have calmed down a little, but not just yet. His list included small countries like Taki and Kusa, but they were also Konoha's allies and would watch for him during the first few months. Naruto didn't intend to celebrate his freedom by entering a dictatorship, but AIM probably wouldn't give a damn about Konoha. If Konoha checked, he would be caught on the road because Kumo and Kiri were simply too far away. Iwa was good, since who would have thought the Yondaimi's son would go there of all places? However, if he could think of a way to hide in a place where people wouldn't initially search for him, then the Nara could do the same. If only to make sure he hadn't hid behind the border to wait for them to give up, someone would look around Iwa. Even though there were many other nations that would be far more beneficial to him, at the moment he was looking for a place with the tranquility he needed to study Kyuubi's seal. A place where he could train his Suiin jutsu without any issues, and little to no dependence on shinobi. As though reading his thoughts, Kyuubi asked, "Does such a place actually exist?" Kyuubi. Sama, of course. This was a condition of their agreement. Without hesitation, Naruto nodded. He only did it for laughs and to stroke the furball's ego, regardless of what he called him. Keep in mind that one of the most crucial things a traveler looks for is locations, locations, locations. Is that really the location where you will respond to your requests? You better know what you are doing, I said with a sigh. Panic had resulted from the abrupt disappearance of the Yuki, which had haunted Konoha for years and served as a constant reminder of what they had lost. By now, everyone was aware that Yuki didn't simply disappear, so its disappearance couldn't be good. Was it simply hiding, waiting until it had a lot of people under its control, then coming back and murdering them all? Had it wandered off in search of more prey to other parts of Konoha where no one was expecting it? It was Minato's responsibility as Hokage to allay the fears of his people, which included holding council meetings and giving speeches in public as well as personally joining the search teams and giving them reverse summon seals in case they were attacked by the Yuki or were just buried beneath the rubble of deteriorating structures. There were no unusual collapses or cave-ins in the sewers because the Yuki had weakened all the foundations and structures. Naturally armed with one of Minato's seals, Kushina joined the search squads to demonstrate her support for her husband. After a building was deemed structurally safe for her to enter, she was the first person to enter it. She also entered the sewers first, even though she knew nothing was going through them because that area of the sewers had been walled off to keep the Yuki from going there. To ensure Tsunami stayed out of trouble and wasn't lonely, they had parked her with the Yamanaka. Regretfully, both were still under Naruto's Mekura when they left, which instructed them to disregard everything about Naruto, even his absence. When it was all over, they were too busy and under too much stress to give either of their kids a second thought. It would be nearly a week before the Namikaze family returned to their house. It was too late by then. Naruto raised his gaze to the heavens. Heaven had opened the floodgates after the first drops had fallen some time ago. As he stood there, Naruto allowed the rain to wash away his final ties to his family. Naruto turned around with a sigh. It was finished. The final bridge was destroyed by fire, and the final opportunity was squandered. Officially, he had no family and was an orphan. He kept moving forward, wherever his path might take him, without ever turning around. Although it wouldn't be difficult, he needed someone to let him in because he was still half a day away from his destination and was rapidly acclimating to the new chakra concentrations required for his genjutsu. Naruto took a step. After a week, the Namikaze family was able to get back together. Throughout the week, Tsunami had stayed with various clans and had not returned to the house. All Kushina and Minato did was go to and from bed and then return to work. Neither met Naruto's seal activation requirements. Until today, that is. Every sensor had been on duty around the clock, the entire village had been searched, and Konoha could now be considered safe. Furthermore, they were now able to utilize the parts of the village that had previously been abandoned. Overall, the village concealed in the leaves flourished even more because Konoha had gained more land on which to build. When Kushina arrived home first, she got to work making a big pot of ramen for the family. Next up was Minato, who had only slept for maybe 12 hours during the week and was completely worn out. After confirming that the girl had indeed entered the compound through the door, a random clan member finally returned Tsunami from the Akamichi and departed. At first, neither parent was overly concerned about Naruto because they knew that the boy typically had some observers. Even when he gave them the slip for a while, he mostly just read, meditated by a pond, and or watched shinobi train. Nevertheless, Kushina scowled when she came into the kitchen and saw that there were just 2 people seated there. Although she was aware that Naruto frequently skipped lunch, she thought they should all be together on this particular day. Does either of you know where Naruto is? She inquired. Unconcerned, Tsunami guessed, out. After all, her foolish brother wasn't nearly as important as the smell of ramen. In addition, she had stayed up late playing with her pals before being woken up early to continue playing. She was worn out. Minato scowled now, though. Kushina, do you remember who we asked to care for him while we were away? I know that we were talking about him the night before, but what happened next? After giving it some thought and searching her memory without success, Kushina noticed something. Minato, is Naruto's chair humming and glowing? It was true that the ancient chair was emitting light pulses, seemingly in an attempt to attract attention. He gave her a slip of paper, drew a few seals around her, and met her eyes, saying, Tsunami, come here. I'm going to activate a barrier around you. What I just gave you was the key to release it. If something happens, you wait until it's safe, and then you run and get help, do you understand? Now frightened by the gravity of his voice, Tsunami nodded. Tsunami was encased in an azure orb that would stop almost anything when Minato activated the seal. He stepped carefully beside his wife, knowing she was safe. He had 2 arrays to prevent anyone from entering, so it didn't seem likely, but it never hurts to be safe. Minato tried to use his limited sensor skills to check for anomalies. His wife, his daughter in the barrier, his arrays scattered throughout the house, and, faintly, the chair. Along with several others providing the same power throughout the house. It contained a tiny quantity of chakra, but not enough for anything harmful. It would only detonate the chair and possibly send fragments in their direction if it had an explosive seal. Kushina glanced over his shoulder as Minato, thinking it fairly safe, took out a kunai and tapped the frame with it. In a flash, the chair blew off its legs, seat, and back, just as he had anticipated. They both hid their faces from the falling rubble. Before the same explosion erupted from various locations inside and outside the house, they exchanged uncertain glances. After giving each other a quick nod, they instructed Tsunami to remain motionless while they inspected the house. In fact, every area of the house that contained an item that was solely Naruto's was destroyed, including his room, which had the loudest explosion, as well as his toothbrush, toys, and towel. Minato whispered, "What the?" Now that it was over, he went back to the kitchen and was shocked to discover that the blown-out chair had miraculously reformed itself. He also noticed a small seal, a rather simple one that enabled the user to play and save a basic genjutsu. A few years ago, it was very popular, and everyone used the seal on wallets, chests, and other items. However, how did it end up here? He glanced at his spouse. She questioned, "Did Naruto do this?" Minato gave a shrug. That seems the only explanation. He wouldn't tip off the arrays, and would not be recorded as an intruder. But there has to be someone helping him. There's no way that he could have enough knowledge of fuinjutsu and genjutsu to make this seal. It's simple, yes, but one must at least know what they're doing to craft this. Kushina looked at him. Minato, you have the habit of leaving things lying around. Is there any chance that Naruto may have learned something out of scrolls that you didn't put back into their shelves? Minato nodded despite scowling. It's possible, but that alone would not. Oh. Kushina gave him a look. Oh, what do you mean oh? Minato gave his head a scratch. I gave Naruto the permission to browse the library, and he may have learned something there. Kushina gave a blink. I see, in any case, we should find Naruto, and ask him what this is supposed to mean. Look, he tore up half the house. Tsunami had disarmed the barrier after deciding it was safe to do so. She just wanted her ramen, regardless of what else was happening. Who cares about Sen's stuff? It's not like he's being here all the time. Kushina spun around, feeling uneasy about her mother. Senses. What do you mean he hasn't been here? Tsunami realized she had just made a mistake and slapped her hands over her mouth. Nothing mom, can we eat? Kushina, however, was not a moron. Tsunami Uzumaki. Namikaze, do not lie to me. Look me in the eyes, young lady, and tell me exactly what you meant when you said San hasn't been here. Since when? I haven't seen him since he called me for break festa week ago, Tsunami blurted out after writhing and searching everywhere but her mother. Kushina gave a blink. Again, slower. Her lip was bit by Tsunami. I haven't seen him since he called me for breakfast a week ago. Even then he was gone for 3 days while you were on that border patrol and he arrived that morning. She caught Kushina's attention. Even though the offense was extremely minor, she disliked being misled and having information withheld, especially by her own son and daughter. When she recalled the day and Naruto's agitated voice, she assumed that he had either had a difficult morning or that something else had happened. When she got back from the search, she was going to ask him. So you were lying to us? When I asked you how you and your brother spent the time, he wasn't there? You left your brother alone? Tsunami's gaze shifted to the ground. She muttered something that, with a lot of imagination, could be interpreted as, "Yes, Mom." Minato gave her a look. "Tsunami, you know that we don't like lies. I think you should spend the day in your room, thinking about what you did. You will be skipping mealtime today." Tsunami gaped in dismay. She pleaded, "What about the ramen? Please Daddy, not the ramen." But her father refused to listen. "What punishment would this be if we gave you ramen? Of course, you are not getting any ramen, that's part of your punishment. Now, are there any other things you'd like to tell us about? Some other misconceptions, or lies, that you didn't correct us on?" Tsunami turned her head stubbornly away, scowled, and folded her arms across her chest. "I'm not telling." Kushina and Minato looked at each other. They had a different priority at the moment, but Tsunami's response had essentially been an admission that there were other things. Before disappearing in a yellow flash, Minato told his wife, "In any case, we should find Naruto. I'm going to ask the guys watching the barrier for help." Tsunami was led upstairs to her room by Kushina, who then turned on the seals to keep her there. She did so and discovered that, although she must have done it dozens of times with Naruto, this was the first time she had done so with Tsunami. She began to question whether she had ever punished Naruto for something his sister had done and how many secrets they had kept from her, given that she was punishing Tsunami for lying and concealing Naruto's frequent disappearances. Later, she began searching for her son herself. Asking friends and associates was the first step in the search for a partner, so Kushina followed suit. Only then did she truly recognize that Naruto was acting strangely. Since his accident, he had been under constant observation. Although he had occasionally gotten away, these were rare occurrences, and most of the time, someone could vaguely recall seeing him on the training grounds, in the library, or simply walking around town. Despite being watched constantly, Naruto never once sought out the company of a person his own age or made any kind of human contact outside of watching shinobi train. She was forced to consider why her son was acting so alone. At least one of his friends ought to have made an effort to speak with him, even if the injury had left him feeling down. Was Naruto possibly alone among his peers, with no friends? Minato insisted, "What do you mean he may not be in the village?" Although the barrier had several flaws and was primarily used to detect intruders, if it was registered, it could be used to search for a specific signature. Naruto should have appeared as a red spot on the map since his chakra signature was registered, but it remained blank. This could mean two things, the current watcher had said. Either Naruto had simply left the area the barrier encased, or he was dead. A highly improbable possibility given that residue in the coils should be sufficient to identify a corpse as long as he was younger than 2 weeks. The news had obviously not gone over well with Minato. "I'm sorry Hokage Sama, but that is really all I can say. He does not show up on the map, so either he's dead, or in an area that blocks the sensors, like a compound, or he is not in the village." Minato gave a nod. "I see. Thank you for the advice. I'll check the compounds that may be the one in question." He walked away. He appeared before the Hokage's tower and scanned the area, attempting to determine which one Naruto would most likely be in. Which child does Naruto spend the most time with, let's see? As he considered that, Minato became aware that he had never witnessed Naruto interact with a child. Naruto's life rhythm appeared to be akin to that of a shinobi who lost the people he loved, going through the motions without truly letting anyone in. An excellent illustration of this would be Kakashi, even though the man did spend some time with the last person he could relate to. With Obito and Rin dead and his teammates gone, Minato was essentially the only thing preventing Kakashi from severing all connections with the outside world. And Kakashi was alone most of the time, even when Minato was around. Although it wasn't unusual for veterans and elderly men to act in this way, Naruto shouldn't have done so as a child. He chose to start with the Aburame and work his way through the other clans if Naruto wasn't present because he didn't know who else he might play with. Kushina's desperation was growing. After looking through Tsunami's friend list, she discovered that no one had ever seen her boy or even known anyone who was friends with him. Children are receiving a very concerning message if they don't know anyone who is friends with the twin brother of their best friend. At the moment, she was speaking to the infamously bashful Hinata in the Hyuga compound. "I'm sorry I circa can't help you, KK Kushina.san. B. But I didn't see NNN Naruto.san." Kushina was in a desperate mood. "And you really don't know anyone who spends time with Naruto? Nobody?" Hinata gave a headshake. She tugged at her hair. "Kushina," she exclaimed, "Arg. It's like my son doesn't have a single friend." Her feet suddenly piqued Hinata's curiosity. Kushina hesitated. "Hinata, does Naruto have friends?" Hinata was attempting to gaze intently at the ground. She appeared to be having self-doubt. To bring them to eye level, Kushina lowered herself to one knee and placed her arms on the girl's shoulders. "Hinata, please. Naruto's gone. if you know anything. Though she was unable to look her in the eyes, Hinata shook her head slowly. Before Kushina heard Hinata's tremulous voice, her head hung down in disappointment. N.No. Naruto.san doesn't have a.nef. Friends. She caught Kushina's attention. Hinata, do you know why? Hinata didn't seem to want to be here, but rather anywhere. She was a terrible liar, but she truly didn't want to cause Tsunami any trouble. Hinata. Hinata nibbled on her lip. At last, she confessed. Well, I know how it started. Kushina gave her a look. Really? How? Hinata swallowed. Well, it started really harmless. Thus, Kushina became aware of Tsunami's actions as well as the birthday celebration. Kushina was obviously shocked to learn of this behavior from the daughter she had assumed to be as innocent as a kitten, especially since she had verified that the ban she had imposed on anyone who played with Naruto was still in effect whenever questioned. Kushina was starting to get concerned about that. The puzzle pieces appeared to fit together to create an image that Hinata didn't like, especially when combined with a few other clues she had left. Tsunami appeared to have begun using her brother as a scapegoat. Perhaps, though, she was overanalyzing the situation. After searching through every compound that might have interfered with the scan, Minato found nothing and frequently discovered that his wife had been there first. He then went back to asking the barrier crew if Naruto had come back, but they informed him that he hadn't. Since Kakashi was a tracker and should be able to locate him with relative ease, they decided to seek his advice after he was reunited with his wife. For a change, Kakashi arrived on time after answering his old sensei's call. After listening to the somewhat upset parents, Kakashi summarized, "So you want me to find your son? That shouldn't be too difficult. I know that he spends his time inside the village, so he shouldn't have much experience traveling. When was the last time you saw him?" After exchanging puzzled glances with Kushina, Minato took the initiative. "I'm not sure about Kushina, but I haven't seen anyone not involved in the Yuki hunt in a week." Kushina gave a nod. "I was also involved in that. The last time I saw Naruto was before the sweep started." Kakashi's forehead twitched once now. "You're telling me that he may have a week's head start? The boy knows how to walk, so he can do shinobi.travel, which means he could be practically anywhere by now. And even if he traveled the civilian way, he could still already be well out of High no Kuni. Not to mention that we had heavy rain a few days ago, so if he left before that, then I'm afraid there is nobody who would be able to track him. All footprints are gone, and the rain will have washed away every scent. I'll try to get a trace, but if he left before the rain, then I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." Despite his dejected expression, Kushina nodded, "Please do." Kakashi gave a nod and left. Just as he was leaving, another guest came in. Minato forced a weary grin. "Hello, sensei." Jiraiya gave a friendly nod. "So, where is this message that your son may have left?" He was shown the chair by Minato. Jiraiya used Chakra to charge it, and the scene played. Jiraiya charged it once more, absorbing the scene once more. At last, the silence became unbearable to Kushina. When that happened, everything that was his was blown off. "What do you make of it?" Jiraiya gave his head a scratch. "Well, if it is from Naruto, then the message is pretty clear. He is telling you that he no longer considers himself a part of the family, and left." Minato gave a headshake. "But why would he do that?" Jiraiya looked at him almost pityingly. "I'm not in his head, but I think I can guess part of the reason. Look closely at the chair. Heck, look at everything what's left of it." Before noticing the genjutsu, Minato replayed it several times and examined it closely. Everything was destroyed when viewed in slow motion, with the exception of the armchairs, which were saved for last before being destroyed as well. Once more, the armchairs were the first item to be remade when genjutsu began. He kept repeating in his mind, "Armchairs, what's left of it, first and last," until it finally clicked. "Oh God. Kami have mercy, you think he found out about his arms?" Jiraiya gave a nod. "It would make sense, and it is the only explanation why the genjutsu starts and finishes that way at those particular spots. That's too much of a coincidence to ignore. Either somebody else let it slip, or he overheard you talking about it, unless either of you told him. He looked you in the eyes." Kushina clapped her hands in front of her mouth after both parents shook their heads. Then she exclaimed, "Oh no. We talked about his arms just before I left for the border patrol, remember?" When Minato recalled what he had said at the time, his eyes grew wide. If Naruto had somehow heard that part, even if it was just black humor. The sound of several seals alerting him to a problem in Tsunami's room cut short his contemplation. He jerked his head up. "There's a problem with Tsunami," he exclaimed. Minato led the little flurry as Jiraiya and Kushina leapt to their feet and ran to Tsunami's room. Tsunami had been hurling objects around all day in a fit of rage. She certainly wasn't denied ramen, and she was never sent to her room. Her brother, not her, experienced those things. After breaking almost everything in her room and bathroom that wasn't sealed unbreakable, she finally collapsed in her bed, exhausted. When the hunger began, she wanted to sleep it off. Like a movie, the images of her, what she did to him, how he saw her in his eyes, and how he felt kept playing over and over again until she lost it and leapt from the bed. They halted. She didn't remember any of the pictures. All from her perspective. When the images returned, she touched the bed again and removed her hand as though it had been bitten by a viper. The pain began at that point. Instinctively, she got up to go to her brother after what began as a minor burning. Only then did she come to two realizations. She couldn't leave her room for one thing, and her brother wasn't here, so even if she did, it wouldn't help her. She barely made it to the toilet before everything in her stomach rushed out the same way it had entered due to the increasing intensity of the burning. Even after throwing up everything in her stomach and tasting only the bile on her tongue, she continued to heave. But things didn't improve. Millions of freezing, cold needles were jammed into her skin, burning her lungs while simultaneously burning her skin. Her joints felt like they were bending in the wrong direction, everything seemed to tighten, and her blood was boiling in her veins, scorching any tissue it touched. 2 spinning drills were being slowly pushed into her eyes, her internal organs were melting, and her ears were popping under pressure. Tsunami had never experienced such agony before. She was unaware that it even existed. The pain was so great that she was unable to even scream. She was limited to whimpering. She dropped to the ground. Her knees were sufficiently scraped to draw blood. Shadowy figures entered as the door flew open. Her mother said, "Tsunami? Tsunami, what's wrong with her?" "I don't know," was her father's response. She grabbed onto a hand that touched her, desperate to get the pain to stop. "Arg. Jiraiya," Jiken said. Tsunami whimpered once more as the hand was yanked away. She stumbled, "It hurts. Get Naru.ni. He makes it all better. Need Naru.ni." Her mother asked, "Jiraiya, what's wrong?" She mumbled, "Hurts. Naru.ni." And then, at last, everything went dark. She felt a tiny burst of the Kyuubi's chakra. His arm bore the imprint of 2 tiny hands, glowing a fiery red, and Jiraiya gazed at it. He gave Tsunami a look. "Minato, I think it's a surge." Minato gave him a look. "A surge? But she's been a Jinchuriki since birth. She shouldn't even feel them by now." As a child, Kushina knew a lot about Jinchuriki, but she didn't understand what they meant because she hadn't used the device before and the surges occurred when she was so young. She let out a gasp. "Jiraiya, your arm." It was raised by Jiraiya. "It hurts pretty badly, I can tell you that much. I think Tsunami tried to channel the Yuki into me." Minato stared in awe of him. "That's impossible. You're not a Jinchuriki. Your body can't handle Yuki." His arm caught the older man's attention. "Yes, I think we can see that." Minato gazed at Jiraiya's arm, then at his daughter, then at Tsunami. "Now that you mention it, I never noticed any surge. Pain even when she was a baby. But that's impossible. For her to feel it even now, she'd have to have channeled practically every surge into someone else. I think someone would have told us if something like that happened." Jiraiya scowled. "What did Tsunami say before she fainted?" "Get Naru.ni, he makes it all better." Minato's mouth fell open. "You think she?" Grimly, the toad. Sage nodded. "Yes, I do." Kushina gave them both a look. "Can someone explain to me what's going on? What's wrong with Tsunami?" Minato let out a weary sigh. "Nothing's wrong with her, Kushina. Jiraiya thinks, and I agree, that Tsunami is going through a for Jinchuriki completely normal thing known as a surge, as you did. You probably don't remember being so young. What it means is that the Biju, in our case Kyuubi's Yuki, floods Tsunami's coils, and by extension her entire body, with Yuki. Don't worry, Kushina, it's harmless to her. It happens to get the body used to the Yuki, so that in a situation where she has to call upon it, it won't immediately damage her body. The Jinchuriki normally only feels the first few surges, before the resistance against Yuki is high enough to ignore it. The first surge is the worst, and it only gets better from there." Kushina gestured to her daughter, who was writhing in pain even though she was unconscious. She recalled some of her own early years. "This never happened before. I don't remember that from my childhood at that age and definitively not hers before this." Minato swallowed. "Well, Jiraiya had a theory." He paused when he saw his former teacher glaring at him. "And I agree," he added quickly, "that this is probably the first surge Tsunami has ever really gone through." "Wait, I thought that happened as soon as the Biju settled?" Tsunami has been a Jinchuriki since birth? Minato averted her gaze. Normally yes, but we suspect that Tsunami's case is a little different. Jiraiya assumed control. She tried to pump the Yuki into me when I touched her, and before she fainted she asked for her brother, since he made it all better, we think. However, Kushina had made the connection on her own and recalled what Naruto had always told her when Tsunami was in his bed. It is painful. She was extremely pale, and tears filled her eyes as she recalled scolding and dismissing him each time he attempted to tell her. No. You think she pumped the Yuki into Naruto? She asked. Minato gave a nod. It seems the most logical explanation. Jiraiya now raised her voice. It would also be one more reason why he up and left. Before today, when was the last time Tsunami was in his bed? Kushina scowled as she shed tears. A few weeks ago. A month? Minato gave a headshake. No, the seals I placed around the house also look who's in what room. Tsunami was in Naruto's room little over a week ago. Jiraiya gave a head nod. I thought so. A surge is only supposed to happen roughly every 2 months until no longer done. It looks like Kyuubi's chakra is getting impatient because there is no progress, and shortening the intervals, probably while increasing the amount of Yuki. As with its sensory memory from the Kyuubi, it remembered that its host needed to do this. Maybe it was getting dangerous to keep doing it until an older age and it started doing so in shorter intervals. Naruto was probably able to recover from the surge in 2 months, but with the way it is now, there is no way he could last when he is injected twice a month. I'm no expert, you'd have to ask Bawako, but my guess would be that his body is starting to break down. So if Naruto realized this, and somehow learned that you kept the true state of his arms a secret from him, well, we have a motive. Minato let out a sigh. In any case, we should get her to Bawako, just in case we're wrong. Jiraiya's gaze shifted to his arm. And how do you suggest we do that? After rolling her eyes and grabbing a blanket, Kushina wrapped Tsunami in it after tossing it over her trembling body. Like this, Jiraiya. How else? The older man defended himself by raising his hands. Hey, I'm single and have never been a father, so how should I know how to take care of a child? As she made her way to see her good friend Bawako, who would likely not be amused to learn that they still hadn't told Naruto about his arms and that the boy was now missing, probably because he ran away, the mother muttered, men. Like dutiful puppies, the 2 men trailed after her. Minato felt as though the entire world had fallen on him as they made their way to Bawako, knowing that they would soon receive a reprimand akin to that of young children. How could he have failed to see what was happening? As unsettling as it was, Kushina had informed him that Tsunami was one of the reasons Naruto had no friends. He and Kushina looked at each other and realized they had decided on the same thing. There would be some adjustments once Tsunami was operational again. For both of their kids. Even though his sister's life would soon undergo a complete mental and physical transformation, Naruto discovered that he had made a small mistake. He had looked at Shinobi routes when he had looked at the maps for his destination. His objective would only be a half-day's drive away using those routes, but he couldn't just run up cliffs and through treetops while posing as a regular civilian. More significantly, he was confined to clear roads and couldn't simply move in a straight line. Furthermore, he failed to remember that because it was a remote location, they lacked the resources to get there quickly. Therefore, if he walked through the night and sea, it would take him a full day rather than half a day to reach his destination, the land of waves. Nevertheless, Naruto had no choice but to begin walking. Journal, no diary, 7th year summer. Although it seemed so long ago, it wasn't that far. I had a life. Altering birthdays 7 months ago at a house in Konoha. I discovered the reality of my condition 3.5 months ago, and no more than 2 months ago, I arrived at a new location where I could put that village out of my mind. 2 months have passed, and I must admit that both my body and mind feel like they have changed astronomically. Since I will be spending my days alone in solitary confinement, Kyuubi has convinced me that I should write about my experiences and the things I learn. I see it as a means of monitoring my mental well-being. Even though the events weren't particularly noteworthy, I guess I should write down what I've done since that day. It was not too difficult to enter the land of waves. I just got into one of the boats on the tiny port that sail back and forth in the mornings and evenings using Mekura. Waves' import and export of necessities appeared to have created a daily demand for transactions. On both sides of the ports, mainland and main island, merchants, vendors, and patrol officers would congregate every morning to play and look for their supplies. Finding a place to live was a little more difficult. In order to persuade the government official to sell me a property on one of the smaller islands, I used rudimentary henge and genjutsu to confuse and implant memories. The henge made it so that if someone were to break free from the genjutsu by injecting another foreign chakra into them or by experiencing a shock or trauma, they would only remember that face and body and would not be able to link it to me. The islet was nearly 70 square feet in size, which was sufficient to construct a respectable home and deep enough for my plans for an underground laboratory to soon succeed. There appears to be a small construction company on this property that could fulfill my dream of creating the house of my dreams. The 17th of May in the 7th year a week has passed since my initial contribution. I had no trouble finding the company's chief of construction. I forced him to reveal what would be required to build what I wanted under a genjutsu. He thought I was one of his employees, and he enjoyed spending their free time with me. I had to settle for stealing the materials, even though it somewhat embarrassed me. After storming the cement factory and lumberyard with my shadow clones, we had to travel to the mainland to visit the alloy manufacturers. I asked him to provide me with the necessary materials, the names of all the employees who could and would work on the project, as well as their families, and to hypnotize them so that when they were done, they would forget it had ever been done. Since there was no more construction going on at the time, they would assume that each had been granted a holiday. If things continue as they are, the house will be finished in less than a month and a half. They have a remarkable understanding of what is required and how to accomplish it on this terrain. To provide safe passage for the machinery, the mangroves on the island's outskirts were cleared. It doesn't matter because they grow quickly enough that the ecosystem should cover my house by this time next year. I briefly thought that perhaps they would hit oil, but sadly, that did not happen. Childish concepts. With those thoughts, I seem to occasionally recall that I am only 7 years old. Then I think that it doesn't matter what my mind imagines and conjures up, reminding me of a childhood I should have, and I think of people like Hitaki Kakashi and Uchiha Itachi who had already killed at my age. 1st of June in the 7th year. Despite the workers' construction, I have been very busy. I was working alongside them as well. After they finished the lab first, I had them make holes that I would later enlarge for escape tunnels and applied seals that would help stabilize the walls and terrain. The next seal I created was the Gofu Kekai 5 seal barrier, a C-rank sealing barrier that I placed in the lab after writing "Forbidden" on 4 of the seals and placing them on the 4 corners of the islet. By doing this, it would be impossible for the enemy or my foolishness to destroy the lab without first destroying those 4. Although it appears that there is another aspect of jutsu that allows you to defend the seal by creating clones of the attackers, I want to try that out first and will leave the seals in this configuration for the time being. A clone would use the area at the center indefinitely until it was dispersed using a Kekai Tengai Hojin barrier canopy method formation as a detection barrier. The clone would act as a catalyst, and any shinobi who approached within 200 feet would be dealt with. Actually, this one is B rank, and I won't use it until everything is finished. Now that the lab is finished, I'll leave them upstairs in the house and begin my research and experiments on seals. I can hear the Kyuubi talking to me again. It has provided me with tidbits of knowledge and guidance that should help raise its chakra. The primary project is to change my own seal, grant the Kyuubi complete, unfettered access to its Yuki, and then consume everything. That is a side project. I have to give the 4th Hokage credit for a job well done on the seal, even though I hate him. Naturally, I don't say it out loud because I'm afraid the Kyuubi will become irritable and moody. I would never acknowledge it, not even in front of the Shinigami, if it weren't for the fact that I already did it by accident and I would be terrified of him, it as much as he was at the time. It appears to have acquired the capacity to sense my environment and potentially read this entry. It appears to be insane and has descended into the aforementioned state. This will delay us by no more than a week. The 7th year's July 21st instead, it took 2 whole months, but the house is finished. I placed a genjutsu on the islet called Megan. Kokoni Arizu no Jutsu. Demonic illusion. False surroundings technique. After confirming that no one remembered the construction, I've created the impression that the mangrove has gotten out of hand and that the area is unusable and inaccessible. The seal has undergone a modification. I've finally discovered the interaction sequence that will allow me to easily enter the mindscape and discovered how to grant the Kyuubi access to my senses and the ability to see our surroundings. He won't be able to interact with them or control them, of course. In the unlikely event that he decides to take control of me, it claims that I have made extensive plans and that, although it would not have done so in accordance with our agreement, the idea had previously crossed its mind. It looks like I escaped a kunai. The completed house appeared a little too large for one person. He had intended to construct a conventional 4-square home, but in his haste to complete the project, he added a floor, making the house 3 stories in total, including the lab, basement. In reality, the library, den was located in the attic. The scrolls he had stolen from Konoha were now included. Kekai ninjutsu, also known as barrier jutsu, bukajutsu, also known as weapon techniques, dojutsu, fuinjutsu, genjutsu, kenjutsu, kinjutsu, Iryo ninjutsu, also known as medical ninjutsu, ninjutsu, jikukan ninjutsu, also known as space, time ninjutsu, and finally, taijutsu, were arranged in separate bookcases according to their respective subjects. Only Buki and Kinjutsu had 2 scrolls in their bookcases, while the majority, with the exception of Fuin, General, Kekai, Ken, and Dojutsu, only had a few scrolls on their top shelf. There were preservation and reinforcement seals on every bookcase. A wooden desk, a present from his friend in the daimyo's court, and a chic, comfortable chair were placed in the center of the attic. The room's door employed an intent sensory system and a chakra recognition seal. The room and hallway would detect his heartbeat, blood pressure, and brainwaves in the event that he was attacked in his own house. If they revealed a dangerous situation, they had time. Delayed paper bombs prepared for his command. Hey, he wasn't going to leave them his life's work if he was going to die. There were the most rooms on the middle floor, which led straight to a small parlor. The 2 windows next to the door provided a tinted view of the furnished floor that arranged the rest of the house. A small round table with 2 chairs near the wall was to the left of it. There were 2 additional entrances to the front and right. The front door actually revealed a staircase that led either upward or downward. To descend, he only needed to press a concealed seal on the left of the second staircase, which would descend the remaining stairs and reveal the lab. The one on the right led to the living room, which had a small couch in front of it that could accommodate 2 people comfortably and 3 people just right, as well as a small fireplace on the south side. A love seat by its side and a standing lamp that could light up the entire space. This time, a door behind the love seat revealed a kitchen in the Western style. There was a smoke ventilation shaft on the roof, and the stove was located directly in the center of the space. The sink and refrigerator were located on the left side of a footdot in a half counter that matched the gray wall tiles. There were 6 cabinets above the sink and a pantry between the refrigerator and the sink. His rooms and the rectangular bathroom by the left of the stairs were accessible from an entrance to the back of the house, which was located next to the refrigerator. Although not much had been added to either, Naruto wasn't concerned about it just yet. His various projects and discoveries were kept in medium-sized cubicles with work tables below in the lab. He created a shadow clone for every project before he left for work, and when they thought they were ready to part ways, they rang a bell to let him know so he could be ready for the informational backlash and ensure he didn't make a mistake in his own sealing procedure. Gaki. He was extremely fortunate to be on the verge of dipping the brush in ink and injecting his chakra into it. Ah, Kyuubi. Sama, damn it. Don't do that. I told you not to talk to me when I'm immersed in the project. His face would have looked fantastic if he had made a mistake like that. He asked angrily, what? That's just it. You have only worked on it and the other projects only since the lab was finished. Even if this would shorten the span for you to finish the seal, you have forgotten something important. I have? Said a bewildered Naruto. The orange beast merely obeyed. Your body. Huh. Was his astute response. The animal gave a sigh. Working on the construction doesn't count. You haven't worked on any jutsu, or your control. If this keeps up, you won't even be able to see the sun and I won't have you be a weak container, the red-haired boy said, looking to interrupt. His tenant needed a way to vent, and he was right as usual, well, the few times he spoke. In order to avoid being discovered or seen on a regular basis, he stayed busy doing a variety of things back in Konoha. The creation of a much-needed schedule was imminent. Their plans were too significant and meaningful for either of them to fail, and he had to thank the Kyuubi once more for pointing out the shortcomings in his agenda and plans. 4th of August, the 7th year summer will soon come to an end and give way to fall. I've begun putting in outdoor climate notification seals and temperature regulators. I've started studying Kyuubi's yin-yang chakra after he spoke with me and gave me an overview of how it forms. There are many similarities between him as a Biju and me as a human. Our paths are similar in that as my reserves get stronger, they also get stronger to handle their depletion. His have already stabilized since he has reached adulthood. He has admitted to me, though, that he wasn't always that large. As an aside, I can't imagine a baby Kyuubi rolling around with its family, spitting fire, and altering the terrain and landscapes while hunting humans and animals with the innocence of a child. No, it doesn't seem possible to see it that way. I have a suspicion that it had to grow rather quickly in order to support his family. Who or what was his mother, if the legends are accurate, but Rikudo Sennin was his father in a way. Although the chakra points are similar and positioned in accordance with our bodies, I am unable to determine whether they serve a different or greater purpose than mine. For a creature like it, the yin-yang chakra is crucial. As a human, I have a strong need to learn and practice jutsu. To utilize it to its maximum capacity or to ration and spend appropriately, a balance between the two is required. Different methods are used by humans to recover their used chakra. To replenish our reserves and fight for a little while longer, we use soldier pills made by medic.nin that provide a concentrated burst. The drawback is that prolonged use of them can cause engorgement and strain to the point where the pathways to the reserve are severed, thereby severing our chakra organs and causing their death if treatment is delayed. Outside of it, food, like nutrients like proteins and carbohydrates, aids in the restoration of chakras. Furthermore, our bodies are capable of producing it gradually on their own. Biju only take in chakra from the environment. They don't have these advantages. Nature doesn't have yin, yang chakra, but when it enters Kyuubi and its brethren, it transforms into yin, yang chakra, suggesting that it is genderless, much like stem cells were undifferentiated cells before differentiating into specialized cells. I'll need to figure out how to activate the nature chakra and make seals that take it in. That is insufficient. How this chakra will work with my own is unknown to me. Kyuubi does it automatically and is unable to describe the procedure to me. September 9th, the 7th year my theories and papers on absorption seals have been updated. They were designed to absorb the chakra of humans. The drawback is that they are temporary and can be applied to inmates and people who pose a risk to others. There is a limit to how much chakra a seal can absorb, and changing it frequently will be inconvenient. I must find a method to keep passing the chakra without it retaliating, leaving the seal empty and the Kyuubi without his. The majority of methods absorb a target's unique chakra. They are usually used to drain an opponent's physical energy and restrict their range of techniques while also absorbing their chakra and adding it to their own chakra reserves, enabling them to use it as if it were their own. It gets challenging at this point. The yin, yang elements are what set the nature chakra apart from us. Our seals are unable to identify the nature chakra as one to absorb because it does not divide it. I'll have to come up with a completely different formula that 1. Identifies the nature chakra. 2. Absorbs only the nature chakra. 3. Routes straight to the Kyuubi's seal without entering mine. And 4. Is an only entrance channel that doesn't share it. I realize I'm saying this again, but it's crucial. Just as a virus can infiltrate your body and harm it, so too can the nature chakra. It could kill me, make me a rock, or even a vegetable. I can't use the clones because there's no proof of what it can do, and if they dispel the remnants, they might come back to haunt me. Additionally, it depletes the target's resources. Would my use of the surroundings result in the area becoming devoid of life? That is an additional issue that must be resolved. The 6th of October in the 7th year I'm growing weary and restless. I can't remember the formula, and it's been nearly 2 months. The upcoming day of my birth, not my birthday, as I don't need to celebrate, has made the nightmares worse. Previously, my pride prevented me from bringing it up, but Kyuubi has suggested that writing it could be beneficial. Since the furball, as I call him, is sleeping right now, it won't be aware that I've written this, but I've come to view him as a superior. I respect him and pay attention to everything he says, even if the details and my perception of him are complex. Maybe he's always pressuring me to improve both myself and our work. Though he has a somewhat twisted sense of humor and a cynical and shrewd personality, I can honestly say that I trust his perceptiveness. Directly trusting him is far in the future. I'll take a break from working on the seals given the current situation. Smaller progress has been made by my clones with our other projects, but I think that everything depends on solving the nature chakra absorption seal. NAS from now on, I might go back to work after that date and write about what transpired. How long ago was it that he himself took a walk away from the rough floor of his lab and the modest warmth of his home? He could honestly say that he missed the warmth of the sun this week, despite the light bulbs in his lab and the natural light that came in from the upper floors. Together with the unpredictable weather of the past few days, truly Brahmas weather, the clouds appeared to take up most of the sky today. A few days seemed natural to his clone, as though the weather was created or induced. Furthermore, he could comprehend the confusion after seeing their memories. Clear skies were common in the land of waves until late October, not the first week. And even though that might just indicate that hurricane season arrived earlier than expected, the fact that it only snowed for a short while yesterday added to the suspicion. He made the shadow clone hand sign and shrugged, not understanding the phenomenon. 4 clones suddenly appeared. With their order in mind, they each started working on the day's tasks. He was pleased to report that he could now extend the distance and capture a good portion of the main island's center, including the port, while remaining in the islet and observing the detection barrier. To buy food for the next few days, the second actually headed for the port and ran into a random villager. Early on, he discovered that merchants were suspicious of thieves and that Mekura might fail if he stole something, as they would likely notice. On one occasion, he nearly got caught, but a hasty genjutsu forced the man searching for him to flee in the other direction. The final two ventured further into the village to ensure that all of the previous genjutsu were in order and that no one was harboring suspicions. He made the decision to go for a walk in order to decompress. The rain continued to fall lightly. He reached the island's rural area on his walk. He enjoyed watching the workers enthusiastically reap the rewards of their labors on the crop and animal farms. In their classless society, these people lived day to day, taking care of their food and livestock, and keeping their homes in good condition or preventing them from collapsing like the Kyoju families. Did he know the names of most families without them ever knowing him? Was that strange? The routine was straightforward. Get up, work, eat, and sleep. It was reasonable, dull, and tiresome, and dull. If anything, this person's life should be dull, but a fleeting thought that made him wonder about his expectations for his life appeared and vanished. It called into question both his intentions as a sane boy and his agreement with the Kyuubi. Would someone who has lived in a home for 7 years leave because they were misled? To venture out into the world and traverse the challenges of establishing oneself. He had no idea, and that burst of elevated thought came as quickly as it vanished. He knew the answers, and they were already there. The first day after leaving, a typical boy would have rushed back. A typical boy would have forgiven, forgotten, and begged for forgiveness for causing their family any anxiety. He was not a typical boy, though. In addition to his life not being typical, his family was not. His thoughts were jumbled by a scream. He was now aware that he was on the main island's outskirts. He could easily shinobi. Jump the next small piece of land because it was close enough. For a few miles, so to speak, there were none behind him. When clouds started to form in the direction of the scream, he became even more convinced that the weather had been unusual these past few days. The sound originated from his side, toward the southwest side of the smaller islet. He didn't hesitate to take action. It seemed to appear out of nowhere as we passed fallen trees, slick rocks, muddy ground, and freezing rain. And discovered a tiny camp with a variety of tents and now extinguished fires. He was made aware of the danger by the rushing and scrambling as a few were running up and down, mainly up. He had not used Mekura to get one of them to notice him. The first person to do so was a man who was genuinely alarmed by how near the blue-eyed, brown-haired teenager he was. He closed in. How? What? How'd you get here? Even though others had already noticed, whatever was going on was more important. Calmly, does it matter? He asked. Speaking as such would also calm others and make them think. He knew from experience with the fox. Seconds later, the man appeared tense, but it was evident. No, I guess not. Kid, I do not know how you got here but leave the same way. We've got a problem right now and there's no time to make appointments with the villagers. It was accurate to say, appointment? Whatever are you talking about? He had not heard any rumors or whispers about mercenaries from his clone. But this man most definitely didn't look the part. Look, kid. I do not have time. One of ours is in pain and sick. He's too frail for the normal medical procedures so we cannot fully help him. Only diminish the pain. Our group has an affinity towards nature and these changes in the weather are the result of his state. Unless you've got a medical degree and extensive knowledge you can't do anything, he gasped. So leave and come back later. The man exclaimed, losing patience and sprinting back toward the group of heads. He was offended that the man, who knew nothing about him, thought he was not worthy of being asked for assistance. That reminded him so much of Minato and his Tsunami training that he would help Kami for that alone, damn it. He threw Mekura over his head and hurried over to the group. Only 5 people remained constantly busy over a figure on the floor, according to a brief summary. The same one that had just caused a minor thunderstorm, and if his suspicions were correct, the same one from which the screams originated. Yes, definitely helping. Had he been questioned later, he would have denied that his curiosity and stubbornness were the main causes of his predicament. He walked around the huddle and saw them bring blankets, buckets of water, either pure or salted, and cloths for the forehead, which quickly became wet or sweaty, and took off the majority of his clothes, leaving the boy only in his underwear now that he had a full view of him. He had to admit, now that he could see, that this boy was seriously ill. He appeared extremely thin and small. Was he being fed properly? It was evident on his tanned skin. If his perspiring body was any indication of how hot he must have been, the heavy blush he carried was even more noticeable. His brown hair was waist-length and spiky, with short bangs that were now tossed to the sides to make room for the cloth. At brief intervals, his breath quickened and his half-lidded eyes twitched. Those nearby hurried their already accelerated pace as the boy began to cry. Unexpectedly, he felt his reserves slowly dwindling as the rain turned into a downpour, and even more unexpectedly, he became depressed. Was this something the boy did? And why was he feeling so depressed? Even though this boy was very talented for his age, it appeared to be detrimental to his health. He recalled the blonde medic's Konoha scrolls, where she discussed her theories on Kekkei Genkei. Although they were very advantageous in combat, some of them had subtle or not so subtle effects on their bodies, minds, or possibly both. Similar to the Mokuton, her main source of research material, who were thought to be the strongest Kekkei Genkei on the planet, they had a severe genetic disorder that continued to affect their health by using their bodies to turn themselves into a source of life, thereby having their body's functionality. Despite the fact that the majority of Senju who did not fight at the time lived past their 80s without experiencing many issues, this was the straightforward reason her grandfather had passed away at such a young age. She had been unable to figure out how to precisely obtain the right gene order in order to have a descendant with the Mokuton without this disorder. Many of her theories center on the notion that Senju and Uchiha's long-distance relationship and a genetic union would prevent Senju cells from having an impact on the body. This appeared to be comparable to what the boy goes through, and if what he observed supported his suspicions, his immune system had a genetic flaw that greatly boosted his defenses, while his emotions had a strong hold on his abilities. Given how weak he was, the boy must have had a difficult life. This brown-haired boy, who possessed a lot of such skills, would most likely not survive more than 10 years if their lifespan is inversely correlated with their power. Do it, Kyuubi. Sama. He woke up from his dazed reverie. Consider it a test. Whatever you want it to be, I have already told you what my purpose is, no matter how twisted it has become. You are at the beginning of that journey. Start it in a good way, because it may change, save the boy's life. Use seals, Iryo. Jutsu, even your genjutsu. Just show me that my container should be truly worthy of holding me. His mini-speech ended, and the redhead watched with unexpected interest. Naruto carefully considered what he was saying because he knew that Kyuubi must have another hidden test. He always had a hidden test, or critic, that he never knew if he passed or not. He could have spent that time considering what it truly entailed, but he had to save a life. To put it simply, seals had rules, and those rules, when combined with kanji, defined each and every one of them. Therefore, before he made himself known, he thought that a quick seal chain sequence and kanji diverse order connection meant that he had advanced to a higher level in seal making. This was different from simply using a conglomeration of kanji to achieve and define the significance of the seal. Each seal master learns a new language and a new set of rules, which is why there are so few seal masters. Just as math uses equations to decipher messages, kanji are created to give a seal purpose. However, not all of the same kanji used in the elemental nations gave away the same significance in sealing, so each seal master is likely to develop their own language as their work develops. Some, like the Uzumaki clan, developed, unraveled, and united all previously known seals in their knowledge and libraries and continued evolving said seals. Most simply copy the language of their previous masters, which is why many can unravel some of their basic seals. Even some like exploding seal. But if one wants to become an acknowledged seal master, one must unravel their master's entire wordbook if they couldn't imagine creating their own. As much as he detested the man, Minato Namikaze was a master of sealing, and he started his own sealing wordbook as soon as Jiraiya passed him from novice. This was the main reason why even Kumo and Iwa, who had some of their own kunai, could not decipher them. Another was, of course, that if the fourth Hokage saw where they were, he could flash to them and either take away the prom kunai or kill every shinobi and scientist within 5 miles, so they exploited half-assed researchers. Nevertheless, if they were to call the Namikaze a genius with the assistance of his sensei, then without attempting to boost his ego and possibly failing somewhat, Naruto could be referred to as a breathing prodigy who, by the age of 8, had developed class 3 theories, out of 5, seals without the aid of his own sensei. This would feature the sum, until now, of his experiments. In Workshop 1, the N-clones would theorize and devise seals on containment void space and extraction. Workshop 2 contained the 12 seal set, originally each kept apart, where they would pass by each seal in less than a second, and reach the last hand sign seal on that part of the body and launch said jutsu from the area. Now he would try to combine each hand sign into one seal and program it to recognize his wanting and launch the corresponding jutsu by reading his brainwaves. Moreover, while that was a bit dangerous considering he could burn down accidentally a person just because it passed through his mind, he also desired, albeit rather dangerous as well, to connect the seal to his mind. Meaning that if it read brainwaves it would do so instinctually and flow the chakra without orders, and while that meant less concentration it meant that it would also not recognize when he chakra exhausted and could kill him. Option 2 would divide his mind until he does both, fighting and molding chakra expletively for the seals, but direct control over his range of jutsu and chakra inputted through the seals. Theoretically, he could spam genjutsu and ninjutsu at unsuspecting enemies, leading them to believe they were either clones or friends to his side. However, what he was about to do was only done in theory over in Workshop 3, which was similar to Workshop 2 but in a different direction. Instead of using the seals on himself, this would cater to jutsu seals planted in an area that would only work out one jutsu at a time. In practice, he wanted them to conform to his newly formed style. With the help of the 12-dot set, he was able to acquire medical ninjutsu instead of general or elemental ninjutsu and give the boy his own set of immunology defenses. To unite this workshop with the previously mentioned, he hoped to give the boy a newly formed style of seal that would act with his own chakra so that the boy would not be hurt using his own. The first workshop's theory was to literally send any intruding foreign cell that wasn't either of theirs into another dimension. No, do not think that. You can do it. Forget Kyuubi. Forget your reservations. Forget your fears and focus. Yes, it's completely real. The boy was screwed after just one mistake. Inadvertently closing his eyes, he calmed his thoughts and opened them. They had scampered around the child in vain because nothing they were trying seemed to work, and if anything, the weather had gotten worse. From a downpour to a torrential downpour with a howling wind that seemed to force even the deep-rooted trees to bend unnaturally. He briefly wondered how he had missed this change in the weather before he suddenly knelt down, covering his hands in front with his back, and he started writing frantically. 5 minutes later, he finished the first of its kind, and without time to appreciate it, he hanged it into an older man wearing a dapper suit and bow tie, throwing away Mekura much to the surprise of those around him, and spoke. Hello, I'm the doctor and I've come to help. The 8 years October 12th. My sleeping, eating, working, and training habits have changed erratically, and now that I am taking care of Yoda, I feel like I am losing some of my mind. Even Kyuubi doesn't understand how we ended up with the boy, and the clan's actions would have indicated that they wanted to leave the boy as soon as possible if it weren't for the fact that the child actually asked for it. They quickly upped and left when I agreed to look after him until I could find a cure or a better seal. Though I wasn't in the best of moods because the amount of chakra I had to force into the seal left me a little dazed. I blinded the boy and took him home, with a half-hearted plan to dump him in the middle of Wave's streets and leave him there. The bundle of energy he was as nothing compared to how he is now, which may be why they agreed to let him go as soon as I informed them that my chakra would jumpstart him. Apparently, even with his illness, he was a bundle of joy. It's true that the house seems fuller now, but I don't want to keep him indefinitely. In addition, it appears that one of the clones had his share of adventures that day as well. It was fortunate that he did not wind up in my shoes because that would have been an embarrassing circumstance. The 8 years October 28th I made a diagnostic seal for Yoda and discovered that the stronger the emotion, the stronger the weather, and that different emotions have different effects. As I was updating his seal, Yoda kept pressuring me to teach him about chakra control, which he claims is annoying me. I thought it was helpful from the beginning, if nothing else, because I didn't want a waterfall to appear in my house when he cried about it and lost control. I thought he was good enough to go out today and practice as much as he wanted to, and I will see his limits and put him on a schedule to get close to mine. He can control any basic element, which means that he can reimagine old control techniques for individual natures and imagine a few for combining them. In theory, he should be able to use all of the jutsu with moderation, as evidenced by his ability to produce snow, water, and wind. It could be that we try to recreate even jutsu from the Mokuton branch or even the nearly extinct Shikuden, Scorch Release, branch. The possibilities seem limitless, and the scientist in me wants to see the extent of his abilities. I know that these jutsu will be much more challenging for him because he lacks the corresponding Kekkei Genkei, but they are just different elemental chakra types that work together. Normally, it would be impossible, but I have accomplished a lot of things that fall into that category. The 8th year's December 15th we've kept ourselves busy by increasing Yoda's chakra and control, and mine has finally reached low Jonin chakra and mid Jonin control. Unfortunately, I don't have many scrolls for Sweden, and I'm sure that if I had more time, I would have taken more than a few C-rank scrolls and fewer than 4 B ranks. I would have also found the few D-rank Sweden jutsu that exist because, by their nature, there aren't many D-rank because you either need a lot of them or good amounts and great control. The Mizukages and the Nidame Hokage are 2 great Sweden users, but I intend to surpass them all. With the help of his shadow clones, he had completely and genuinely mastered the tree. Walking exercise in the water. Walking as well. He had previously mastered controlling leaves, pebbles, stones, kunai, senbon, and even smaller objects. He then proceeded only to maintain the previously mentioned objects on various parts of his body, placing each one in every joint and finger and maintaining at least 10 by each extremity. He could honestly say that choosing Wave as his place of residence had paid off, as there were plenty of places where he could train every step of his schedule. After mastering them, he proceeded to spin each object in the designated points. He then tried an experiment. He wasn't sure if Kiri Shinobi had created this one, and tried water skiing, which is the expulsion of particles, preferably hydrogen and oxygen, that condense from gas to water firmly beneath his feet and propel him across the surface at a much faster rate. It's safe to say that he fell a lot while doing this. Oh, Mom. It's good to know that the crashing wave could prevent him from swearing when he was young, but he assumed Yoda had a decent enough performance if his laughter was any guide. Never assume he wasn't a blood relative of the Uzumaki. At 10 meters, he sped to the surface and fired after taking a big breath. Sweden. Mazarapa, water release. Wild water wave, water poured from his mouth, and along with the regular water, the tiny waves that came to Yoda's feet retreated and joined Naruto's, shocking Yoda and leaving him unprepared for the 10-foot wave that struck him. Naruto surfaced with a great impulse, taking to the air and landing on solid soil. He looked around to see what would happen, and he immediately began to laugh as Yoda slowly blinked his eyes to regain focus and comprehend the situation. Some of the closer trees were washed away with the wave, and Yoda ended up snared on tree vines hanging upside down. Nice. You must teach me that, Doctor. He insisted on calling him that nickname once more. The child, well, he was his own age, but it made a difference because Naruto was much older, had a pastime of naming people by their most obvious characteristic. Even when he told the perpetually flushed boy, he wasn't named that way. Yoda simply asked, "Doctor Who?" To which he sidestepped the question because he didn't want to come up with other names and lie to the boy. Later, it became their own little personal joke and gimmick. Yes, of course. Have you completed the task? Yoda nodded enthusiastically and said, I still wish Doctor taught me shadow clones. He pouted a little, which might have helped a little, but he was upside down. I've got stone. Spinning while tree. Walking mastered. Mastered. And then there was the tick. He also mentioned how it annoyed him to hear him repeat certain words, and occasionally he would say them once and then again for no apparent reason. When he began, conning, he would then start singing. Are you running, walking, jumping, or standing? Those were the sublevels of each phase. When he reached running during this phase, it was theoretically possible that the boy wearing the purple headband had enough control to know exactly how many clones he could create without exhausting himself. In terms of such control, thanks to Naruto's evil-minded training, Yoda had almost high Chunin control and obviously elite Chunin almost borderline low Jonin Chakra. If reaching Naruto's chakra pool level in 2 months was any indication, then Yoda had the potential to be great. If his accomplishments in the field were any indication, he probably already had close to it. He landed with a gentle thud, enjoying the view of overturned soil and twisted trees as Yoda whistled softly and a tiny blade of wind sliced through the snagging vines that held him down. Jogging, Doctor. Nearly there. As Yoda pouted a little, he laughed and said, well, I can almost teach you the jutsu. However, Doctor, your use of that jutsu was truly incredible. Which one was it? Thanks. It was Sweden. Mazarapa, water release. Wild water wave, not to be confused with the water trumpet jutsu, and although they sound the same and virtually use the same hand signs, but while one is used to spread about, the other is concentrated in a straight line. The thing about this too is that with enough expertise you could change effects on the fly. That was a shame. Still. Overall, he was likely at the apprentice level of Sweden Jutsu, which is the highest ranking if one were to categorize one's knowledge into novice, apprentice, adept, expert, and master. To clarify, novice was a beginner who understood the first water manipulation exercise, which was also a water walking exercise, and who primarily knew their affinity. Regardless of affinity, it was taught to all shinobi because of its effective use in commonplace circumstances. In order to control their body's developing experience of feeling how said affinity passed through during the exercise, apprentices already had firm control over the referred exercise and had learned D-rank jutsu. The water skating exercise was the first new exercise that Adept had to learn in order to advance to the next level and at least 2B rank jutsu. Water was held to a very high standard because, aside from wind, it was the most adaptable of the chakra natures. In terms of raising the bar that high, Sweden's ability to change both shape and state was the reason it defeated wind, albeit only marginally, since it was able to expel or emit water molecules to alter its composition to the best of their abilities when practicing. As part of a side exercise for chakra control, he would stand at the edge of the ocean and allow his chakra to envelop him, pushing the water in the opposite direction. Making his own waves, controlling its movement. At the next 2 levels, various exercises that grew out of this one continued. Sweden users at this level had to alter their body's internal settings, which is sometimes confused with the Hazuka clan's Kekkei Genkei. While they could do this without any problems, a normal shinobi could blow off their limbs without warning. Expert came at a high cost. High reward setting. Since a truly knowledgeable expert could use the weakest jutsu with great efficiency, it didn't really matter how many A-rank jutsu one learned. The side exercise in this instance had him at a river, performing the same action with the swifter current, ideally one close to a waterfall, where you would subsequently perform it with said waterfall. Master was an entirely different ballpark. Without a doubt, a Sweden master user could create water in any kind of weather, terrain, or circumstance. Able to overwhelm any disadvantage at enemy jutsu sprung about and change jutsu on the fly with hardly a hand sign. One would have to create a unique trademark jutsu in order to be fully acknowledged as such. However, the catch was that the jutsu had to be ranked as high B or higher. While many people today are familiar with the downgraded form of the Sweden Suiryuden no Jutsu, water release, water dragon bullet technique, the first Mizukage achieved this stage by demonstrating it to the world. The Mizukage was famous for spitting it out of his own mouth. Instead of being the B rank that it is now, it was easily an A rank jutsu back then. He had already thought of the first water jutsu technique that was close combat range rather than short range. He would only start experimenting with said jutsu when he attained the proper level, of course, and waiting for it made it all the more desirable and desirable. He was in the midst of a storm in the ultimate environment for the last side exercise. His objective would be to dominate the sea in his immediate vicinity. Perhaps at his exertion within a 25-foot radius. "That's so cool, Doctor," he said, his mind shattered, and he turned to face Yoda while searching for leaves in his hair. "I read it up, but it's the first time I've seen it. And even more awesome how you'd use the normal water to make bigger the wave." Naruto corrected, saying, "To make the wave bigger." Huh? Naruto let out a sigh. He still needed to properly correct his language skills after a few months. As soon as he realized, "That's it, Yoda. That's how I can resolve all my problems," Naruto rushed back towards the house, leaving Yoda perplexed. "You don't say make bigger the wave. You say make the wave bigger, but you're right, by using the ocean's water and blending my chakra with the Con. Yoda was certain that his family's decision to come to Wave had been the right one. In addition to the fact that he nearly passed away once more, a man came and assisted Kami. Between the fever, lucid dreams, and the jumbled reality, he had a dim memory of that day. If his family's gossiping voices were accurate, he could have materialized from thin air as a Kamisend. The doctor, as he called himself, placed a ceiling tag on his chest and everything went dark before he could say anything more. The chief was tense and perhaps keeping an eye out for any indications of discomfort, as he usually did following the attacks, and that was the first face he saw when he woke up beneath the darkened sky. His aunt followed, and after sifting through all of her tears, he realized how delighted she was to see him. Even though she had reared him during his early years, she never liked it when he called her mother. It seems that she had been devastated by his mother's death during childbirth, and even replacing her for him was too much for her. His father wasn't present. The drawback of being a part of a caravan was that the other person could typically just claim innocence because of those one-time encounters. Not knowing him meant he would never know what he had missed, so he wasn't sad about that. His hearing came next, and there appeared to be some yelling. As Tenki Hireta, the protector of the Tenki clan, yelled at a man repeatedly, a clear voice approached from the opposite side. The man remained silent, ignoring Hireta and watching in awe as Yoda stirred and woke. Seeing that whatever he had done had no lasting effect, the man sagged in relief and said two words to Hireta that instantly stopped him and made him spin around so quickly that he was positive he heard bones crack. The words were too soft to be heard and too far away to be clearly discerned. He told the man, turning to face him, that it wasn't over because Hireta's voice was undoubtedly heard. They discussed everything they could and rounded up the rest of their clan before heading to Yoda. Although he could see it in their eyes, many expressed their joy at his recovery. Even though they cared for and loved him, they knew things would only get worse. Being a traveling clan, they learned body language at a young age. By observing the bodies of liars, scammers, imposters, and fraudsters, they were able to avoid danger and save time and money. If he had any other unique abilities, they were the ability to read people if he had enough time. He felt depressed and a little betrayed at the idea that they didn't have faith in his recovery. Yes, he was aware that they didn't actually hate him, rather, they hated the circumstances. People are always affected by situations in which they have no control. They wished his suffering would stop because they were tired and unhappy with every result. He was not afflicted, even though, of course, no one wanted him dead. But unlike them, this man appeared interested and hopeful, while they remained cautious. He had never woken up from the episodes this well, so he must have been the one to assist. He read the man's instinctive examination inconclusively. He portrayed himself as a doctor of some kind, and he looked tense but relieved as though he had overcome a significant obstacle of his own, which made him strangely appreciative of the strange physician. The thing that must have confused him was his eyes. Even though he was obviously a man, his eyes conveyed a younger age and a difficult life. Undoubtedly, it left him perplexed. Unhappy with himself. Yes, his clan called out to him, but it would be best to avoid worrying them further. Yoda? Yoda? Can you hear me? His aunt gave him a scared and expectant look, likely worried that whatever had happened had affected him somehow. It seemed contradictory, but learning to read body language had somehow helped him build his own defenses against his own brethren. Obeken. What's up? Was a simple mask to help them forget their worries. He would never use them to conceal evil deeds or guilty expressions, but a simple switch and the mask completely concealed him for them, relieving them of their anxiety. With the exception of the chief, who even now wears a melancholy smile as though he somehow knew what he was doing, which he most likely did, it appeared to work. Most people would not notice or even dare imagine that he would be so skilled at mask wearing. With a sigh, his aunt expressed gratitude that her sister's son would persevere despite his illness and always recover. She said, her eyes watering, "You know I love you too much to let you go, don't you? You scared me to death, that's what's up." For her, he would go to the depths of hell and back. His own blood, whom he would call mom or mother in his own mind, there was no doubt that he would do anything to ensure both her happiness. He looked back at her, wide-eyed and burning with emotion, at how she could still waltz right back up and cure his mind of negative thoughts despite everything that was happening. At her declaration, he whispered and cracked his own sincerity in his voice, "Thanks, Obeken." To Yoda, it seemed as though the man debated with himself over his condition and his physique. The clan waited contentedly by their side until the good and heartfelt moment passed, and then the sounds of unfamiliar feet crossing the field and heading towards them broke the silence. The doctor, deciding it was all over, came to a knee by his side and, despite the fact that many were on guard for any threat, was given a pass by the chief and his aunt. "Are you able to channel chakra? Whatever he thought happened to Yoda must have been good," he said, adding with a hint of giddiness. Yoda nodded briefly, and the seal that had been hidden on his chest appeared. Everyone except Yoda, who had not yet discovered it, bit back the surprise it held. The man read the strange signs in kanji and a whole bunch of other things so strange that Yoda was completely clueless about what it was on the first. His smile and happiness seemed to grow as he finished reading the thing on his chest and, with a big whoop, jumped on his feet, surprising many of his clan members who thought he was crazy. "All right." The chief was the first to inquire, "What was in his possession? What did you do? Was it successful? How is Yoda doing?" The doctor of his one-man party was detained by the quick fire questions. The man emerged from his euphoria, turned to face the clan with high expectations, and sighed. The boy suffers from severe combined immunodeficiency, a genetic disorder that puts him at constant risk of infection because it causes the body to lack vital white blood cells, which protect the body from foreign threats. He thought, "I don't know if you probably knew, but one research paper years ago had theorized that the stronger a Keke Genkai was, their body had in some way certain responses to counterbalance it." A few of them nodded in response, suggesting that some of you have, or former Ken members have had, lower defenses and get sick easier than the rest. Nobody knew why this occurred, but it did. In fact, Yoda, the boy here, is so powerful that, out of all of you and previous members, he likely has the weakest immune system. He would most likely pass away at this rate long before he turned 10. There were gasps all around, and Yoda's aunt started crying. Yoda himself just went a little pale, but then he steeled himself at the thought, if it came to that, then he would live to the fullest his counted days, no matter what the outcome. Unbeknownst to him, both the chief and the doctor saw his emotions briefly cross his face and gave the boy an internal sad smile while feeling proud for him. But, at this, they closely followed his words, "That's not the outcome anymore." If anything, they looked amusedly perplexed. "Thanks to the seal on his chest, I prolonged his life by a margin of at least 6 years, and that was just one." The thought was met with cheers, and his aunt shed happy tears this time. The chief bowed as he approached the doctor, who appeared suddenly cautious. "You have greatly benefited our clan," the chief said. "We truly appreciate you doing this. Do you want any compensation, if it's within our power?" The physician eased up and gave him a sheepish neck rub. "No, it's all right. I'm really happy to assist." In actuality, the seal was the first of its kind, and although I anticipated that it would function, I never anticipated those outcomes. I'm confident that if I had more time, I could create a much better one that ran without my help. Even so, we thank you, the chief said, shaking his head in surprise. However, by function independently, did you mean something else? Oh, right. Incredibly astute for a chief. With a few tweaks, I'll have the seal operating independently and better than it was originally intended to be. At the moment, it uses my own resources to maintain its power. The chief said thoughtfully, I see. Then he removed Yoda from the group, leaving the others a little perplexed. Hey chief, how are you? The joyful mask remained spotless throughout their speech. When he saw how far the young boy would go to cheer up their group, the chief couldn't help but smile. Yoda, my boy, too much has happened in your short life. You have lost so much because of this illness that was said to have come from your own blood, but you have persevered and shown bravery by fighting to shield others from the suffering you go through on a daily basis. I want you to persevere and live so that you can eventually lead this clan. Although we may not achieve the same level of fame or success as others, our life has kept us prosperous for many generations, dating back to the years before the Third Shinobi World War. Being alive this long has been a miracle. The young man's appearance before us was a miracle. See? If you think about it, miracles are just second chances after all hope has been extinguished. You understand what I mean when I say that this was done out of despair rather than contempt or a lack of love. Only a genuinely second chance, from and for you, will give our clan the second chance they so desperately need. It had a certain appeal, an ideal, sometimes to live for, a great pursuit to better himself and live, and Yoda looked at him, unwavering and amazed. Of course, his childish mind had not yet come to terms with that thought. To one day lead his clan through trials and judgments, paths and outcomes, and live free, healthy, and sickness-free. Having made up his mind, Yoda accepted the challenge, live, and one day lead his clan. He needed the assistance of his recent savior in order to give hope again and be recognized by his clan for having overcome all obstacles. He was relieved of the blindfold and left to explore the area. It appeared to be a house. In fact, it was a house unlike any he had seen during his brief journey inside Wave, and the waiting room was pleasant enough, but the kitchen left him speechless. He hoped the doctor was a good cook, and the thought nearly made him salivate. Fortunately, the doctor returned, checking for any inconsistencies, and finally turning to face Yoda. I refuse to be like people who think they are perfect. You won't be allowed to enter some parts of the house without my permission or presence. If you try, you'll perish. What you see now is a transformation, a henge. Yoda merely nodded. Well, that saves time, she said. Surely you've seen it or know of this. I don't want people to notice how I look, and I can't trust you with it if I don't know you. I'll do everything in my power to get the image out of your head if it fails soon, and I know you've seen it, even if that means performing percussion maintenance. Are we in agreement? The underlined threat caught. He just nodded. Good. Come on, we need to buy you food and other necessities. I'll show you the house later. Don the blindfold. All right, let's leave. Yoda had been in the house for almost 2 months, and the freedom he had gained with the help of the doctor's seals was evident. He had experienced some strange moments, but that was to be expected since the doctor's mood swings were among the most memorable. He had also benefited greatly from the basic knowledge that was taught on Chakra. With the doctor's help, he had started to ask for you to be able to enter without my consent or presence. Try to create a fighting style consisting of moving around the enemy and using the battlefield to his advantage, and he felt stronger and faster. He was confident that his movement, agility, stamina, and flexibility were superior to many genins ever having, regardless of their specific training. In the future, he would think that combining his developing Kekkei Genkai gift with distinctive attacks that manifest, like wind gusts, though he could hardly whistle at the moment, would give him a great style. When his emotions were at their peak, he could create rain and water from almost anywhere, which confused enemies and targeted their blind spots. He was not that old, that much was certain, but he was very intelligent and sharp. There were incidents where any other person who had traveled for long periods of time would understand topics of care and precaution any experienced traveler knew, but the doctor was unfamiliar with this. Then there were the childish glees at discovering minimal details and new features in his seals. His greatest skill at this point, reading people, had yet to reveal any meaningful knowledge, and that more than anything upset him. He was drawn to him despite the fact that it was so strange. The doctor had, despite occasionally frightening him, looked at him protectively as though he were making a final, desperate attempt at anything, really. It was confusing to him, but he was also eager to see where his new life under the doctor's care would take him. In any case, it was inspiring. Their conversation after the doctor had tricked him gave the doctor an idea that left him perplexed. Just a few days prior, The doctor had decided it was a pain to blindfold Yoda each time they left or returned to the house and had just built a tunnel that led to various locations. Suffice it to say that occasionally they nearly drowned when the clones made a few mistakes and dug too close to the ocean floor, but now it was quicker to get to the house. He didn't know the precise location of the house, but a rough estimate was enough for him. When he emerged, he saw that the doctor had just scattered the N-clones that had been working and made more. 7 of them now showed up, each of them already knowing what to do and assigned to their respective post. 9 had been the doctor's limit up until that point, but that left him feeling extremely exhausted. "What's going on, doctor? You left too quickly for an explanation." "It was always in front of me, Yoda. Well, not in front but inside, but considering it's actually another dimension than the portal to that," the doctor exclaimed, clearly feeling even more ecstatic than when he had first met Yoda. Whatever it was, it left him talking endlessly for a long time. "Oh, we'll discuss that specific seal's workings later." The final sentence was an afterthought, but Yoda still nodded. "Remind me to check the spatial progression cell that intrudes the interpersonal mindscape," she said. "Well, doctor, what did you get?" "I won't bore you with the mechanics and try to explain the rather deep intricate details pertaining to the components of human chakra and nature chakra. Just that one is within and the other is all around us," the doctor said, turning his back and pacing frantically in front of him. "I've been researching how to integrate both into the human body for months." Yoda's eyes widened at the suggestion. Imagine the entire chakra of the planet repeatedly filling your reservoir and possibly never tiring out of it. That was undoubtedly a shinobi's wet dream. Nearly limitless reserves and only tiring out from stamina, or a mad scientist's. A pale man sneezed in a secret underground hiding place. "Even after assigning that task to 3 of the clones, there is one significant difference that has irritated me for months. I can conduct research for at least 1.5 to 2 years if I multiply that by 3. My other experiments have slowed down as a result of it. Additionally, they required it to be finished. The ability to adapt is a unique quality of the chakra within me. Similar to how it was passed to you through seals, it has greatly aided your immune system in removing foreign cells and establishing barriers to prevent their progression on your health." Yoda nodded, barely understanding most of what he said, but memorizing it all in case the doctor used his technical jargon again later. "It clicked when I used that water jutsu at the beach," Yoda said. "Why can't I summon a large stream of water using a jutsu that uses the body's chakra reserves and then combine it with the natural waves of the ocean to create a larger wave?" "You get it?" The doctor sighed and ran his hand through his hair, saying, "Basically, I'm going to insert the nature chakra into the chakra inside my body and its adaptive capabilities should, in theory, just like your seal, respond by evolving and producing a stable support system." Yoda himself was a little lost at that point and let him know it. Even so, Yoda nodded as he considered the number of variables, connections, ordering, and classifications the seal would require for the doctor to decipher. The fact that Naruto never mentioned his own chakra but rather the Kyuubi's was another thing that slipped Yoda's mind. The most crucial element for success was how the incredibly powerful chakra that supported that area of Konoha without its host could adapt. This was likely the Kyuubi's aspect as well, or more accurately, his gift to his host, whether he wanted it or not. The Ichibi's unquestionably remarkable control over the sand and desert, which it consistently transfers to hosts. According to old legends, the Nibi can control fire and, if true, can bring the dead back to life. Sanbi's extraordinary strength and speed in the water, combined with its ability to manipulate coral and its crazily hard shell defense, actually put it in competition with the Hachibi. Because of his intense hatred for human culture and his crazily hard shell defense, Yanbi was a challenging character to get a gift from. However, it is said that his Jinchuriki had a Yodan release, so it is possible that the Biju also had control over it. Given that it is a volcano, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume it had a great deal of strength. Gobi, who was from the plains, had an unrivaled speed on land and an all-around superior ramming power. His gift, ironically, was steam-based. Until Kiri hunted him down, the Rokubi lived a solitary life. His abilities were corrosive, and he could even harm his family by touch, gas, or liquid. As the lord of the insects in the sky, Nanabi had more wing room, or legroom, than his fellow Biju due to his domain. He also preferred the humid conditions of the deep forest, where he ended up by Takigakure. The Hachibi undoubtedly embodied that which unites land and sea, with his strength only occasionally outmatched by the Yanbi. He can play against any other Biju, especially the Kyuubi, thanks to his skill at using both tails at once. The Kyuubi is perhaps the most dangerous of all. If one were to take a certain fox's mindset that the more tails, the more powers, that would not even come to appreciate his strength and power. However, that wasn't what made him superior, rather, it was his embodiment, his ability to adapt, He was able to face anything head on once and then shrug it off the next, weather anything and come out stronger, and absolve it all. It also gave his Jinchuriki the ability to adapt to attacks, illness, chakra, strength, mind, or even to adapt against its own feeding hand. Even so, Naruto managed to figure it out, with his tenant's assistance, of course, and he was determined to make sure that this accomplishment and this discovery would transform his ceiling. The 2nd of January of the year wave's end of year feast and celebration has played a significant role in the recent success of the progress. We were able to unwind and relax as a result. I'm almost finished with the seal that will both increase Kyuubi's chakra and return it all to him. Actually, it's more of a repair for the stomach seal that was already implanted than a complete seal. For the majority of the month, I searched for the more than 50 seals that prevented the Kyuubi from absorbing my chakra and the 60 others that prevented him from properly producing or transferring the one on my arms. I'm definitely worn out, and my brain is nearly burned out from overanalyzing every tiny seal. The reason we went to the festival was, of course, in disguise. After finishing, I intend to take a break from sealing. Personally, I will take the training to a higher level of focus because I still have 3 other projects to finish, so I'll be leaving it to 3 clones. Yoda may also join me. My physical limitations are underworked, even though I've learned a variety of jutsu, which is all well and good. Let's see. Started creating a training platform that should provide us with a more thorough and succinct report on how to achieve peak performance, assuming I allow Yoda to join again, although it's still in the alpha stages. I think that soon, using Yoda as the lab rat, I will be able to determine, through a series of tests, the best course of action for specialized people. Every day from dawn until a few hours before sunset, they kept going until they were worn out. Their natural powers would be fully developed in the morning. Keeping his emotions in check was Yoda's top priority. He had been informed by Dr. Naruto that his ability to control the weather was largely dependent on his emotions. Drawing the experiences, memories, and emotions that led to each elemental manipulation and attempting to control them without truly feeling them was a better option than clamping them all down and turning himself into an emotionless drone. To his chagrin, and the doctor's amusement, he would eventually be able to control each one to great effect without crying uncontrollably. Singing a tune and attracting a small wind with sufficient cutting force to chop a vine or two was effective for him for the time being. Yoda's training platform would rely on his own experiences and creativity to come up with new ways to master his abilities because the doctor hadn't finished and probably wouldn't for a while. He wasn't cut out for genjutsu. He wasn't sure what else he could rely on the chakra control for, but he hoped to have enough to use the shadow clones. As with nature, his elements were more of a brute force than an attempt to actually control it. Yes, lead them and restrict his output. However, authority over an innate, uncontrollable force. He wasn't prepared for that kind of objective. As a result, he had enough genjutsu experience to overcome them. The doctor would cast them in a biased manner, and occasionally he would wager that everything would work out. Taijutsu remained after his weather, elemental manipulation. He wasn't really sure which one it was, took away the ninjutsu component. The martial art of taijutsu was a manifestation of the body and the individual's personality. It is possible to learn a kata and practice it repeatedly, but what if you didn't share the same mindset as those who practiced it? Then you would fail its mastery, or rather it would fail you. Because of his unpredictable, emotional, and impulsive personality, he needed something that would enable him to win a fight like this and leave his opponent completely defeated. That was the main understanding he gained from the doctor's explanations, at least. The road was a little more difficult for Naruto. He had a viewpoint that many people his age wouldn't understand because he was the son of 2 amazing shinobi, even though he detested acknowledging this. Clan members discovered that the skills they needed to employ the clan techniques were ingrained in them by years of evolution. There are occasionally people who deviate from the clan's norm and go their own way. While some do not, others do. The Akamichi clan, for example, has historically studied the changes in their bodies and adapted each individual to their jutsu unless they were certain to die at chakra depletion. Those who did this may introduce their learnings into the clans and reformat some teachings for easier learning and teaching to future generations. Similar to the Hyuga clan and their centuries-old mindset of taijutsu. Dojutsu perfection, some failed, and their clan rejected them as failures and continued to use a rigid, generic traditional learning method, restricting themselves. He acknowledged that his once sister might as well have all the genes to carry on his Uzumaki ancestry because he understood the biology. He did not have the typical red hair, but he did have Minato's feisty figure and the deep-rooted knowledge of Fuinjutsu that is typically reawakened during adolescence. It would be absurd to claim that the Uzumaki had Fuinjutsu ingrained in their souls. Instead, their minds were warped, in a positive way, but still twisted. They had a different perspective on the world, or more accurately, their reasoning differed from others. Instead of using jutsu to avoid or discourage the opponent, Uzumakis just thought of a seal that would paralyze them and quickly and effectively take them out. Perhaps a more accurate illustration would be that they considered every alternative path available and typically selected the least costly one found in seals. All of that in one instant. The problem was that, in the interim, they needed something to fixate on. Like Kushina, Uzumaki was preoccupied with trivial things like ramen or ninjutsu before they opened their minds to the possibilities of fuinjutsu. They didn't become curious because they knew what they wanted was beneficial to them. Finding interest in fuinjutsu and breaking the initial obsession are more difficult the more intense the initial obsession was. He wasn't sure, but some people would say they were cursed. Because of this, one could argue that she wasn't as good as many Uzumaki of her age. She didn't break into her teens because her need for ramen was so intense. She still made intriguing progress, catching up to the previous Uzumaki but still falling behind. However, Naruto broke his obsession a long time ago. He would discover later that it was the instant he woke up. He may have done so on his first day in Wave, his last day in Konoha, or when he woke up in the hospital. His fixation? He would prefer not to consider it. He was still unsure whether it was it or the fact that it was so weak that he resorted to fuinjutsu so quickly, which led to his obsession with it. He wasn't entirely sure, but it might be a peculiarity of his. Even though he had a ton of seal-related experiments planned, genjutsu was his only other interest. There was a certain elegance to deceiving people to suit his wishes. He undoubtedly believed that he was suitable for such a branch. Genjutsu and fuinjutsu both required a certain amount of knowledge and creativity to use effectively. So he had the seals and genjutsu to learn and hone. He might not be proficient in ninjutsu as a primary skill, but it was a helpful one in times of need. Few ninjas truly received recognition for backstabbing their targets, while too many dared to use their chakra reserves to the fullest and compete with the most elaborate jutsu and taijutsu to give each other breathing room. Showing off is the fool's idea of glory, as they say. But Uzumaki Naruto was no fool. No, he gave it some thought. Was he Naruto, Uzumaki, Namikaze, Kurama? He shrugged in his mind that it didn't matter. Right now, his taijutsu wasn't at its peak. He couldn't really use any of the katas he remembered from Kushina in public. Not against Konoha shinobi, and definitely not against foreign shinobi. Numerous people were aware of and recalled Uzumaki's fighting techniques in order to relay the information to superiors and, via espionage networks, reach Konoha. Hunting parties sent after him because they believed he was still alive was the last thing he needed. Therefore, he either created one or had someone teach him another. Both were believable but had drawbacks. Learning from scratch would hinder his other skills, and having one made recently would leave too many gaps in his defenses that others could take advantage of right away. He could learn taijutsu more quickly and receive one instruction from someone else, but if he was caught, they might betray him because it would undoubtedly be a ninja. He didn't currently have the mindset that he could battle and defeat any shinobi. Maybe with Yoda's assistance and a well-thought-out battle, but by yourself and with little combat experience? No. In addition to those 4 skill sets, he possessed the scroll with his great-grandfather's sword, if he recalled correctly. It made sense to pursue kenjutsu. Like some, he was a little excited by the prospect of a new shiny sword. Stabbing ability, but it would put even more strain on his regime. He was still a child, so sue him. Few people may recognize the sword, but they will either assume it is an imitation or think he stole it from someone close to Uzu or found it in Uzushiogakure. However, at the moment, it made no difference because he also lacked a mentor in this area. Kenjutsu would therefore be neglected at this time. She lost because of the ground's fierce resistance to the impact. Her pride was wounded by the realization that the weeks prior to her training were insignificant in comparison to the present, and she coasted through it with a sense of pride. She kept telling herself that it was for her future because he couldn't always be there to protect her and many people would come looking for her because of her abilities. She got it. In a way. Really, it didn't matter what she thought at the moment. She couldn't really say what other people would call family at this time. Perhaps a few months prior to the incident. Was she to blame for losing her family? That the person standing in front of her now didn't really understand what she stood for and sacrificed so much for. She had admired the person before her, listened to all the tales, and dreamed of one day joining her village's ranks to be by each other's sides. She now cursed the existence of this individual. But she wouldn't be here if it weren't for this person. Get up. She let out a deep sigh as her face and body began to perspire. She was exhausted, Kami. But it would be worthwhile, she told herself repeatedly. She would become strong enough to crush him, whether or not she met this person. Crush him for all the suffering and pain he had brought about for her. for losing her life and her family. Crush him so much that he would lie beneath the surface, staring back into her eyes, filled with remorse and terror that she would show him how foolish it was of him to ever interfere with her life and her family. She would kill him after he finally realized why she had been beating him, and his body, mind, and spirit had come to terms with death. Get up. More firmly this time. After taking a final breath, she got back up and prepared her stance. She would show him. She would show them all. Hi. Like any other morning, it came and went. He followed his routine as usual. Take a shower, eat breakfast, work out, and then head to work. For the past few months, he and his colleagues have been busy building the building in the islet that is adjacent to the main island on the far north. A man appeared interested in starting a business where he would rent and sell fishing boats to people with careers. According to the circulating rumor, he would also attempt to assist Waves in expanding their exports into the mainland and, if feasible, the main five. It seemed intriguing how, after settling here, he discovered his purpose in life, how to make the most of his youth, and how to land a fantastic job recently. As a diligent worker, patriot, and guardian to those he knew, Kaizo rose to prominence throughout the land. He gained notoriety for his actions in opposing the daimyo and assisting his own people. Due to his efforts, the daimyo provided assistance for their farms and fishing exports, which were the primary source of income for the land. He later rose through the ranks of the lumber and construction company, earning the nickname Stamina Man, a joke among his friends, and delivering speeches while demonstrating his belief in the maxim, never give up on your aim. The man was genuinely adored, and if he were appointed the daimyo's successor, nobody would be shocked or opposed. Unfortunately, Kaizo was a fictional character. Only 2 people in the entire land were aware of that secret, which was a certain surprise. Everything about it, the name, the persona, the ideology, the peculiarities, the feelings, the sentimental connections, was phony. A boy whose whole identity had been made up by an 8-year-old. Even though he was only 9 years old, he was already a bright, nearly brilliant child. Those who believed the man was real would never be aware that the small area on it had been overtaken by a basic form of genjutsu. Even though he detested factoring such a term, it had been a lot of work. Mistakes had been made when combining the human mind with luck. However, by strategically confronting the public and gradually hypnotizing every man, woman, child, and even pet under his control in a matter of days, with the aid of shadow clones, he prevented anyone from discussing Kaiza until he was done and had developed the persona. He had lived with all of the genjutsu since he was a young boy. Naruto was one of the orphans who left his home in search of a better place, and he eventually found a new home in Waves. In actuality, it had been worthwhile despite nearly being a pain in the ass. Utilizing Kaiza had given him numerous chances to recreate and enlarge his own house. By using company materials and fabricating information about it, he was able to find and mark locations for his own training grounds and extend the already vast escape tunnel that ran beneath every building, residence, and port of significant interest. Naturally, a sophisticated genjutsu prevented it from being found, and only a Hyuga could find it. However, since the likelihood of one coming here and discovering it was low, he had not yet created a seal that would prevent their vision from seeing it. He was already working on that at the time. For Naruto, the past 2 years have been a great use of his time. It took a toll to create Kaiza's history and his true base, but he couldn't really complain about the double life because his own physical training had reached a limit for the time being. He had 730 days, or 2 years, exactly as the model calendar, give or take a few weeks. He earned 630 by taking 100 Wednesdays off as his leisure day. He spent about a week hypnotizing every citizen and straggler that came through, and he knew practically everyone on land and in the port. Even now, a few of those people still come by, and he was constantly on guard. 560. 3 days, give or take a few, remained after 2 more months of looking for places to establish a base or home. You have nearly 11 years of memories if you multiply that by an average of 7 clones per day. He had been foolish. Many people in the know would love to take advantage of Shadow Clone's greatness, and he had nearly killed himself in his conceit. He discovered what had transpired later. It seems that the amount of information that the human mind could process in a given day was limited. After that, the information was understood and stored in long-term memory. Now, sleep was still used to calm the brain and process, even by people with perfect recall, or memory, as one might prefer. What would happen if someone spent nearly 2 years using 7 sets of memories every day? The fact that he survived that long is a miracle in and of itself. The brain is a wonderful, powerful organ. After abusing the jutsu, he had been experiencing the aftereffects for a few days when he passed out in the middle of the day. By chance, Yoda had located him and put him to bed. Fortunately, he had missed his birth date. As he appeared in his mindscape at the time, the memories of Konoha took a backseat. He looked back to back at the seal because he had nothing better to do. He discovered an intriguing ability to use his jutsu as though in the real world, which was a rather foolish notion given that it was his mind. He was on the verge of tearing it out to see what would happen, but he might be endangering himself. It seems that the Shinigami's assistance was considered when the Namikaze created the seal. The power was real regardless of the fact that it had split the Kyuubi's soul and chakra and that the contract had been broken from the beginning by allowing Minato to live and taking the Sandaime instead. He started working because it looked a lot like his former home. A jumble of sealing clusters, sequences, and arrays with a large number of seals, restrictions, and hidden codes. Now, to recall that he had been working alone on the process since nearly the beginning, while his other clones developed and produced seals. He began using the scrolls he had stolen from Konoha to train his body and learn more. A daily routine of recognizing every seal and, since he could, removing, altering, resetting, and countering each one. The time was reduced to a tenth for each clone used in his mind, freed from the burden of chakra exhaustion and aided by shadow clones. He didn't know how long it really took because time moved in an odd way in his head, but he was successful. He had shattered the valuable seal of the Namikaze. Undoubtedly, it was a difficult journey, and Kyuubi's persistent nagging and napping when he asked the chakra beast questions didn't help. Many people were drawn to the unsettling scene of broken earth, raging rivers, and bloody ponds filled with corpses. Undoubtedly, the sight of such a view would make anyone trespassing on the property snatch at their very best. This was appropriate for a place known as the Bloody Mist. Many years were spent at war for various reasons, such as interclan conflict, the demands made by the daimyo or kage, or for this one, the annihilation of all Kekkei Genkai throughout the archipelago. Unable to express their demands and reach a compromise, the two sides, as usual, turned to violence in the struggle for their beliefs. In an attempt to overthrow a crucial location for either side of the conflict, the rebels, as the Mizukage had dubbed them, had seized the opportunity to engage the country's forces. Numerous bloodline clans interacted with the rebels, as was to be expected. Primary clans, such as the Yuki, Terumi, Hazuka, and the few surviving Kagaya following their near extinction, clashed with one another. To the relief of some, 3 of the 7 swordsmen unexpectedly joined forces with their cause. As a member of the Hazuka clan, Mangetsu was expected to show up wherever he was needed on the field. He occasionally combined jutsu with his family to devastating effect. As he fought with distinction against his former comrades, his command of every weapon in their country raised spirits on his side. With his Kabutowari, Jinin destroyed any defensive shinobi that were preventing the lines from moving. He rarely engaged the other swordsmen, retaining his intense thirst for blood and being pleased with the weaklings. He knew his orders, which were to severely breach the enemy's defenses. Unfortunately, Amayuri was taken off the field because her illness overcame her will to fight. She killed Kushimaru in her final moments, using his blade Nuabari as a giant lightning rod to burn him to a crisp, just like she liked her meals, as she called her opponents. Unfortunately, the doctors said she wouldn't make it through the night. In a fit of rage over the death of his best friend, Jinpachi started a frantic run with his Shibuki, destroying both allies and enemies in the process, forcing both sides to pause and kill him. The greatest fighters who could spell doom for the rebels, Zabuza Momochi, Kisame Hoshigaki, and their dreadful leader Yagura, Jinchuriki of the Sanbi, arrived at this scene. Any shinobi who dared to approach him were forced to retreat due to his composed manner, their survival instincts kicking in to avoid him. An intimidating trio was created by Kisame, who always had a sneer on his face, Zabuza, who dared to approach, and Kisame. When this extraordinary shinobi entered the fray, the fighting momentarily paused. Yagura hadn't been seen by intelligence for 4 months, and many people thought he wouldn't show up for this one. This was crucial to the plan, but it appeared to have gone horribly wrong. Yagura stood up and brandished what looked like a big staff with hook ends, one end of which was bigger than the other. On the larger end is a green flower as well. This staff played a significant role in his attacks, and the rebels were relieved that he had brought it because, if there was one thing they could rely on, it was that he would not undergo any kind of metamorphosis related to his Biju as long as he had his staff. As it were, he wouldn't go all out. No one could understand the sentimental value that the man, now a monster for his crimes, had for that staff. "My shinobi forces, rebel forces, stand down." His words were very powerful on the battlefield, and many people followed them despite their objections. "Those that consider themselves the leaders of this group come forward. Let us meet." They were clearly apprehensive. This wasn't his usual conduct. What was there to gain for him? The rebel leaders emerged from various directions. For the most part, it was clear who they were. Both small and large clan heads stepped forward, alert and prepared for any attack within a few feet. In addition to representing his clan, Mangetsu displayed a veiled symbol that informed the youthful, appearing Cage that not all of his swordsmen were with him. This infuriated him because, historically, they had always obeyed their Cage's commands. The heads of their respective clans, Hiro Terumi and Mei Sakusen, who were husband and wife, stepped forward. Their daughter was a tangible target for the shinobi forces and a clear indication to them that the bloodlines were dangerous. The other figures came from the nearly extinct clans that lived in Kiri. The rebels appeared startled and perplexed when the statement was made, "Your fighting has come to an end." Some appeared optimistic upon hearing him say, "I have grown tired of this ceaseless infighting." Would the youthful looking Cage cease his slaughter of Kekkei Genkai clans? As he moved his body to cover his wife, Hiro Terumi asked, "What do you mean, Yagura? You have denied every chance for negotiations and even refused to answer why you have started this haunting over those of mine." To his credit, Yagura did not answer immediately, but he had narrowed his eyes at the man's lack of disrespect. He held each man's and woman's gaze for a split second as he looked across the battlefield. "I have let this go on too long. When this disdainful war started, I believed those with me would have the capacity to terminate everything without my need on the battlefield. They're the best of the best, after all. Yet, somehow, you have continued to be a thorn on my side for years now. You have debilitated my army several times over what I wished or expected." Some were clueless about his intentions. What he had deduced had been understood by some clan heads. They were both clearly worried and afraid of what was going to happen. That ends now. He took his staff and prepared himself as he concluded his statement. "You have, now, the chance to resist and die on this field, or lay down your arms and stand trial over your actions." Mangetsu said, "We aren't idiots, Yagura. This time. To stand trial would be the same to die by your hands. We want our freedom back. It's all for nothing if we don't have our freedom. You stand in our way of that. You have become corrupted with twisted thought. You aren't fit to be our land's leader anymore. To the end we will fight against this hate." His sword Haramekure was heavily fueled by his. He held up his staff horizontally and said, "Be it so. I have given you the chance to answer for this petty rebellion. Zabuza, Kisame. Kill them. Kill them all." Zabuza simply grunted, looking as though his thoughts were elsewhere, but Kisame's smile grew wider and he was just as bloodthirsty as his fellow swordsman. Zabuza prepared his Kirigakure no Jutsu as Kisame leapt for Mangetsu, blocking out the area with a potent mist. Many people who were not proficient in the art of silent killing sadly chose to fight the other leaders, but his amazing skill was sure to hold them at bay and gradually defeat them. Neither Mangetsu nor Kisame were interested in playing games over the mist. Mangetsu winced. He had almost mastered every sword in the past, and Samahata was a formidable opponent to Haramekure. With Kisame consuming everything, the sword's chakra, based shape, shifting ability would be nullified. "Come now, kid, give me a good fight." He never stopped grinning like a shark. "I do not plan to die today, Kisame." Throughout the brief glance, they ran at one another, their swords colliding at different points. Even though Kisame weighed more than the other, his stronger body helped him win every fight. Mangetsu, on the other hand, used his abilities to defend and block numerous attacks that would injure a lot of people. He was able to predict each blow that would horribly shave his skin because he knew how Samahata was used. Kisame turned to begin the ninjutsu's battle after rolling away from a mid-height swing. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. A second Kisame joined him, and they ran back toward Mangetsu without saying anything. Mangetsu resisted their power, unable to produce his own clone at the speed they arrived. He had to stay alert as the water clone moved to the sides. He dropped to the ground as Kisame delivered a straight-down head cut, the great sword just missing by a few centimeters, while he parried a clone slash. He grabbed the clone's wrist and pushed it away with an elbow powerful enough to break it. Taking advantage of the situation, Kisame threw a hook that caught Mangetsu square in the face. Swordsman, who had light hair, staggered back. With Samahata's top unbound, Kisame swung it horizontally, shaving at Mangetsu's chest, which was exposed by blood and bone, before punching him in the temple as he fell. Kisame snorted and turned his back to watch where he last saw his own clone, the force powerful enough to send him tumbling to the ground. Mangetsu emerged from the water there. Neat trick, almost didn't notice the exchange. He grinned angrily, a large portion of his face showing. Hiramikure's flag shielded his body as he came out of the puddle, saying, "Do not underestimate me, fish face. It just might be the last thing you do." His grin faded. "That's just rude, I'm just trying to kill you." "Come, fish face." Since he was the only one who wanted to become the Sanbi's Jinchuriki, Yagura demonstrated that he understood that being Mizukage required one to be the best of the best in their village. Furthermore, he was the only one who could take control of the rogue Yuki during the transformation and swiftly assumed the role of Mizukage. His affection for his village made him the ideal choice. Why, then, did this occur? Why had the masked man had to enter his village and ruin his life? Why did one of his closest shinobi, Kisame, turn against the village and betray him to the man? He watched as his image was tarnished, as he killed his fellow companions and his subordinates, and as he sparked the bloodiest civil war since the creation of the land because the genjutsu that had taken hold of him was too powerful for him to overcome on his own. He would have thought that the rage of being imprisoned in his own mind would have given them the connection to unite and fight against the illusion, but the Sanbi wasn't much help. Granted, their relationship was never that great. Instead, Yagura, a man who had to read others for his job, was unable to do so with the three. Damned Biju, and the three-tailed crab. Turtle just watched and observed without saying anything. The few people in front of him were now his only hope for survival. The swordsmen who joined them, as well as the notable and surviving clan leaders. They might be the only ones with the strength to break the genjutsu and defeat him. They would have had a better chance of defeating him if they had met him without any prior conflict and rested well. They were all unquestionably a level to borderline S shinobi, but his dominance and strength over the Biju outweighed their advantages. People like the Kagaya had to be extremely cautious about where to attack because his corals sprouted over contact. Usually, they used Suwarabi no Mai, Dance of the Seedling Fern, which is highly focused on his position, to stab him if he wasn't looking. You had a very exhausted bone user, regardless of their famous rage. Induced stamina, when you added that they would have to throw away their bones every time he touched them. Even though the others performed better, it wasn't enough to really knock him out. That couple worked so well together that it was frightening, and that Yuki did a good job of stopping him with the ice, even though it was short. Still, it was insufficient. Damn it, he said, turning back to face the crab. Turtle now. Help me. These are my people. If you have a heart, help me destroy this genjutsu. I don't want them to die anymore. Yagura was further agitated by the crab. Turtle's infernal silence as it kept its eyes fixed on the battlefield. Was it in a genjutsu, too? He had previously argued this point, but the Biju showed no signs of being in control, and once more, none of his shinobi had paid attention to him. They had apparently devised a scheme while he was distracted. Oh, clever. The Yuki would stop him in his tracks while the Terumi attempted to position him. If he had been in charge, he would have realized the ruse right away. Unfortunately, he would have been twistedly satisfied to see his body being attacked by their efforts. All in an effort to stop himself and further harm his village. Jinin moved into position, and there they are. Wait, no, they wouldn't. Stop, Jinin. No, seemed like a brilliant idea at first. As Jinin led the attack and kept his body busy, they were to use the Kagaya to spear him by the back. They failed to account for Jinin's general restraint of his bloodlust in their calculations. Instead of swinging for his legs, the idiot attacked his staff as he leapt over the ice wall. Even though he had prepared his staff 10 times with hardening seals, it was still unable to withstand the combined overwhelming power of his Kabutowari and Jinin. His staff consequently broke, as he regrettably anticipated. The idiot, even now, I won't be able to stop this. He did not use his staff during transformations for a reason. In fact, it served as a safeguard, so it wouldn't take the strain of being handled in it. The staff filtered all of the energy out of his body whenever he tapped on the crab. Turtle Beast's chakra during a fight. Now that he had lost it and was no longer genuinely in charge of his body, there was nothing he could do to prevent his unresponsive body from becoming unmanageable. There was the sound of a senbon dropping at the battlefield. The rebel forces were more or less equal in strength, even though they couldn't claim to have driven Yagura and his forces back. Even though they belonged to fewer Kekkei Genkei clans, their special skills gave them an advantage over their more numerous rivals. However, they were all aware that the 7 swordsmen and a select few others had little chance of defeating Yagura once he unleashed his Biju. It's possible that Jinin's foolish action cost them the war. Yagura's supporters paused to listen to his commands, while rebel supporters paused to observe his responses. They were all set up to escape. As though it didn't fully comprehend what had happened, the doll body of the 4th Mizukage gazed curiously at its shattered staff. In a fundamental aspect of its controlled behavior, it recognized that the power that had been withheld from it was now its own. So it did. And tremendous pressure increased throughout the region, a feeling that was somewhat reminiscent of the Kyuubi attack from all those years ago. However, it was not the repulsive, unbearable sensation, but rather a barely perceptible pressure that forced anyone to acknowledge the presence of the man in front of them. It was just the first tale, too. His skin boiled with red bubbles that spread out and covered every exposed area in a wispy, layered pattern. It had tiny spikes growing at the back of its short, wide tail, which was no longer than 2 feet. His once pink pupilless eyes turned a deep red, and his nails grew slightly longer. Even deep wounds and scratches started to mend. Everyone had access to the original Jinchuriki form of the Sanbi. Fearing attention, none dared to breathe. When they saw that he had drawn breath incorrectly, they finally saw a shinobi, and Yagura let out a howl. Ruah. He blinked himself. He was standing there 1 minute, and then he was tearing at the poor man. Before everyone jolted to attention, they were all engrossed in his mauling. One of 2 things happened. Either they ran away or they resumed their old fights. Yagura's body targeted everyone with its claws and tail, regardless of who it attacked. The rebel leaders took a firm stance and fought with renewed energy. They realized now that there was a serious problem with Yagura, who was known for having excellent control over his states, because it caused unfavorable thoughts to surface at the beginning. He quickly drew them in with his newfound strength, speed, and healed state. One of the clan's second.in command and the head Yuki prepared their clan's combination jutsu. The number that escaped it was scarce. The jutsu's name was not heard because of the fighting, but its impact was undeniable. Any ground escape was cut off by the 360-degree cover provided by the icicles that the ground produced. They started looking up at the sky, each one higher than the other, and as they got closer, they leaned in the direction of the Mizukage's body. As soon as they were a few feet from the mark, everyone lanced in the direction they had been told, obstructing the view and the sound of flesh being pierced. They waited for the conclusion with bated breath and Yuki gasps. The likelihood of success varied because no one had ever applied the technique against a Jinchuriki. The very ones that were cracking and disintegrating under the strain were the source of the tremor that came from the middle of the icicle field. A powerful roar split them even more, and a green, scaly tail shot up to the sky from the center before swinging down and destroying everything in its path. At this point, Yagura's tail had fully developed to resemble the crab, turtles. He went straight to the 2 who dared to push him to this point. Their combined forces, worn out from their last battle and the newly applied jutsu, managed to hold him back for a while. As the head Yuki used Kiri's unique kunai to protect himself from the enhanced claw that was thrown and impaled it straight at his brain, the mindless cage, fed up with their antics, threw its tail over his head. The now dead Yuki fell to the ground like a puppet severed from its cord after brain matter adhered itself to the blood-soaked tail. Yuki Sama. The poor shinobi became hysterical upon hearing of its leader's passing. He threw caution to the wind and did everything in his power to destroy the abomination that had killed too many members of his clan. His body was sagging, his mind was burned out, and his chakra was low. It came as no surprise that his defenses were brutally destroyed even though he had managed to hit Yagura. A sword boldly crashed on Yagura's head in an attempt to decapitate him just as his controlled body was about to stop the man's heartbeat forever. To many, Momochi Zabuza was the astonished swordsman, his Kabikirabocho straining to pierce deeply into the corals that emerged in defense. Zabuza grunted, not expecting the defense to show up. The now traitor to his cage joined the rebel forces, leaping back unless he wanted to be impaled by the tail. The head of the Tsurumi clan questioned doubtfully, "What is the meaning of this, Zabuza?" As he responded, Zabuza kept his gaze on Yagura. "I have had my doubts about the Yagura's decisions for some time. We all knew the man quite well in the swordsman. It was part of how we could count on distinguishing fakes and staying loyal to the village. When he started to change, we quickly took notice and questioned it between ourselves. With his decision to purge Kekkei Genkei, we debated on where we would side, until we broke up." Yagura continued to stare at his tail swishing and back and forth. "Not having enough information, I stayed with him, but this confirmed it." "Confirms what?" "Zabuza." The man was asked once more. He told them straight out, he is being controlled. They were completely taken aback by the implications of that. It took a very strong and dangerous shinobi to control a cage, and even a Jinchuriki at that. "Tsurumi, we must retreat." "W. What? Your forces are tired and can't fight against the man even with only one tail. The Mizu shinobi are regrouping and the implications of this must be talked about. You cannot win this battle as you are." Tsurumi glanced over the battlefield, taking in the conditions in the new light. Indeed, the swordsman was correct. He quickly indicated the retreat without wasting any time. They would have their troops to fight another day. If the one-tailed Sanbi Jinchuriki had put an end to that notion, everything would have gone smoothly. Zabuza noticed this and swung around to fend off the assailant, lunging toward the group. "Go. I'll hold him off, we'll meet later." They gave a harsh nod. As shinobi themselves, They were aware that staying might result in the loss of additional forces. Zabuza pushed Yagura back to give him some room with an extending swing. The man was essentially a puppet at the moment, and his animalistic impulses prevented him from coming up with more complex plans, even though they were somewhat unpredictable. Knowing that he couldn't defeat Yagura on his own, he organized a lot of deception to lead Yagura down a false path. The place was covered in dense mist, and he began with his favorite jutsu. Even Yagura, who had been the Mizukage for almost 10 years, couldn't claim to be proficient in Mizu's silent killing technique. With all of his information and experience at his disposal, Zabuza sped across the battlefield, eliminating as many of his former allies as he could while preventing Yagura from pursuing the rebels. When the blue shark of the swordsman appeared on his path, their swords clashing, Zabuza looked at Kisami's enraged smile, ending his winning streak. "There's no way you couldn't have known. You of all us was closest to him." When Kisame correctly guessed what he was saying, his smile widened. His strength increased and he started to press down on Zabuza. "Oh, you know, that isn't good. Sorry Zabuza, but I can't let you escape. Gonna have to shave your legs off." In this instance, the fact that Kisame was a good 4 inches taller made a significant difference, but it didn't help. Zabuza fled back into the fog, disengaging from the fight. They've probably had enough time. He thought, I have to get out of here, but he failed to notice the clawing swing that was going toward his back. The sound of muscle and skin being torn seems to reverberate throughout the region. Zabuza tumbled forward and rolled, defending his back against additional assaults. His ribs were fractured or bruised, but his spine was fine, according to a self-check. The fight had become a liability. His life is now in danger of ending. He did everything he could. He sprinted. His tone was one of genuine interest as he asked, "With that done, we should be able to start transferring the chakra. How do you feel?" As he gazed at the masterpiece, he felt a sense of accomplishment, despite the fact that the work was incredibly challenging. Few people had done what he had done, as far as he knew. Completely overriding a potential master level seal by deactivating or removing it from the target without allowing it to shatter. The time and effort he put into the thrice damned seal was mentioned. However, Kyuubi had remained silent for the majority of the proceedings. Even so, be aware that the orange fox was observing his surroundings and exercising discernment until it had sucked out all of the liquid that had been in his arms. The Biju muttered, "You humans surprised me all the time." Naruto heard, but he remained silent. Then he raised his voice. "While it feels good to finally have my chakra inside of me, the same feeling from those few years ago is missing. It is mine, yet." Still disturbed by this, the Kyuubi nodded momentarily. "It isn't? I'll try to look it up and draw a few theories. I already have a few processing. Besides that, how strong do you feel?" It put aside its inquisitive thoughts about its chakra for the time being and looked at Naruto, searching for something that he did not know existed, before reverting to his typical actions. "Why?" Naruto gave a shrug. "I was planning to make progress graphic on how much chakra affected your power level. How strong does it make to be as strong as the Ichibi? How far away is the strength and chakra power levels between 1 and 2? It certainly is interesting to see. That way I may be able to compare Hashirama to the common shinobi today and see able threats." Kyuubi grunted, yet it could never forgive the intense anger it felt when it thought of the wood user, even though it would always be amazed by human ingenuity and progress and its current container having a large chunk of that right now. In itself, the man wasn't that strong to be correspondingly compared to us. At the announcement, Naruto arched an eyebrow. "You do remember that he captured you all. He fought against you and with Uzumaki Mito's help sealed you away, each of you." Kyuubi gave an eye roll. While it is true that Fuinjutsu is frightening branch capable of sealing us, to truly do that it would mean that we would have to lose against them. "You let them capture you?" he said in an unbelievable tone. "While not all we were happy with the decision, we thought it best at the moment that disappearing for a few decades would help diminish the humans' hostility and increase their arrogance in believing themselves superior to us." But why? Why let yourselves be captured, to be used for war, for killing? Because of the Uchiha and Senju. Them? Kyuubi gave a nod. Their keke had such power over us that we didn't plan to be controlled by them for long, so being sealed away for a time helped keep them off our backs. Inside a human their powers wouldn't reach us that easily. Except that mad Madara. Naruto's expression was one of understanding. It could be the reason why they both had a semi-relationship that allowed them to relate to each other. He realized that although Minato and Kushina didn't have total control over his life, their positions and concealment caused them to keep him from realizing his full potential. They also had one thing in common. They detested those in charge of their lives. "If I understand well," he said, his eyes reflective. Uchiha Madara had you fight in his stead at the Valley of the End. Was it his eyes? Kyuubi gave a curt nod. Naruto nodded, not sure if they were and not sure where he was going with this. The Sharingan has several types of evolving phases. You've seen the most common before, haven't you? He asked. After a fully maturing one with 3 commas is realized, the user can gain the next one by experiencing something terrible, I believe. You believe? My interest in them had waned over the centuries, and I hadn't heard of it in such a long time or seen them that I have forgotten much. In the end, that eye evolves into something else. Capable of pulling us, and like an out-of-body experience we see everything without keeping conscious thought of our bodies. They fell silent for a while until Naruto finally composed the question he had been wondering. Why tell me all of this? I mean, I'm grateful to know more of the past and others' hidden past, but why? As he repositioned himself, the nine-tailed beast gave him a barely bearable look, because if you plan to continue this path, to reach your goal and keep your promise to me, then you need to know the dangers we might and possibly will face. The Senju are barely alive and close to extinction, but the Uchiha are still going strong much to my displeasure. And our planning will undoubtedly lead us to a confrontation with them, possibly with Konoha as well. Naruto gave that a thoughtful nod. Their plan, which not even Yoda knew about and would never do unless specifically requested, would be a dangerous one with a high death toll if it went wrong. His curiosity was satiated, and he started going over each seal once more in the hopes of finding any differences that could be fixed and avoiding boredom. Including the time spent in the seal, it still took his brain a few days at most to achieve mental equilibrium. He entered a meditative state to reduce the memories after he had finished looking at the seal twice. As was to be expected, if it had been a long time since his fainting, possibly more than a week, but no more than 2, he felt stiff all over when he woke up. Yoda must have been caring for him ever since he woke up in his bed. Yo. Ta. He coughed, wondering where he was. He was determined to call him out, but his voice came out raspy from lack of use. He noticed a glass of water on the nightstand, but there was no note, suggesting that the boy might have been home. He took a large gulp of it, moistened his lips, and tried again. Yoda. There was some cursing and a crash somewhere in the house. He didn't understand the words of a low voice that might have been Yoda's before a scream erupted from somewhere. Coming. Yoda's running footsteps stopped at his door, and she opened it. He appeared relieved to be awake, and Naruto briefly felt pleased to have someone show such concern before snapping when he asked his questions. He grinned as he approached the bed and had a rag on his shoulders that appeared to be for cleaning, which shocked Naruto because Yoda rarely placated him in this way. Hey doctor. Hey. He also smiled once to say hello and exchange pleasantries. How long was I out? Yoda gave a slight grimace. About 10 days, doctor. I found you sprawled on the floor, with slight fever. Did everything you told me to do. A proud voice. Looked for any attackers and sealed the house how you told me. Took you to bed and read the book for emergencies you gave me since I forgot a bit. He laughed, probably because of a recollection. And closed the lab and library. The genjutsu for outside fell for a bit, but I practiced for 2 whole days to get it, but no one came, so that was good. It was hard and fell every about a day later each time, but I did it, and, well, he started to fidget because he had done something incorrectly. Naruto just snapped that he gets on with it because he wasn't in the mood to waste time. He avoided looking at Naruto, who had narrowed his eyes. Well, about 4 days ago, we ran out of herbs for your fever and food, so I went out, and the food was easy to swindle. I may have met someone, he said. He grunted. Who? There was no point in killing him now. Yoda continued in a more positive tone, as if he was a little relieved that he hadn't exploded. Naruto nodded, his face guarded but with a hint of impatience. Well, I found him up at the small piece of land we get the herbs. You know the one? Well, he was wounded, and when I told him that I could get help, he refused, so I couldn't leave him there, and I didn't want to see him die, doctor. The final sentence was nearly whispered. Naruto sighed. He thought the boy would have a complex about keeping people happy or helping them. Naruto was certain that he would have done so. Did you at least cover his eyes, or knocked him out before bringing him here? In the village, they had no other safe haven or place to rest. Home was the only place they could hide. That gave him the idea to steal more supplies from the construction company and construct a second, smaller hiding place in case he was discovered. Yeah? He had never heard such a brazen lie. Even though the child was skilled at concealing his emotions, he was unable to fool a blind and deaf person when he was caught off guard. With a sigh, Naruto felt his mind racing with ideas for plans within plans to hopefully get the stranger out of his house without causing any damage to his belongings. He rubbed his temples in mild exasperation and said, I'll deal with the guy later, get me some food. He would, of course, crack the damn seal just to get someone who might expose them both. He now had to worry about that. Any negative effects from the shadow clones, his training, the training platform, who would be pursuing him if the man was hurt, and completely concealing his house in illusions. Hell was only a short distance away if this was only the beginning. The 20th of October, 9th year, the headaches caused by the shadow clone incident, as I've come to refer to it, have disappeared. No effects have been reported yet. Maybe nothing, but I should be cautious because I might lose my mind. I've decreased the number of clones I use every day in the interim. Although I currently have a limit of 12 clones, I decided that using half would ease my workload. So far, everything is going well. 3 approaches to continuing the creation of unique seals that will be essential to my future plans. My training is advanced by the other 3. When Yoda discovered that the man she had located was Momochi Zabuza, it was undoubtedly unexpected. I know it's ridiculous, but this is how my luck always works out. When he was halfway recovered, the man nearly killed us. It makes sense because I would have done the same, but he could still kick our assholes even if it hurt. I therefore limited his movement. An unfinished seal of chakra absorption took his and dispersed it freely in the atmosphere. Though he had already killed that class at that age, he is as weak as a greenhorn genin. The effects of his weakness work against him, and he can hardly get out of bed without feeling sick. I'm trying my hardest to figure out how to get rid of him without jeopardizing the house because this will only work temporarily. That's out because he refuses to be knocked out, which is something a good shinobi should do but is annoying in this situation. I will throttle Yoda when I see him again because he has started avoiding me except when Momochi is around, which is concerning and annoying. However, on my path to Sweden Mastery, I am nearly done with my current level. Adept was really challenging to pass, but I'm positive I did it with clones. I can personally attest that I learned 3B ranked instead of 2. This is the next phase of my life. I'm getting stronger, Yoda is supporting me, whether I realize it or not, and my seals are getting to a whole new level. Momochi might still be useful. I'm making sure of everything.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.